Chapter 1410. Black Flame Brush. As soon as the Azure Dragon Hall appeared, a terrifying pressure spread out, causing the surrounding space to freeze. Mu Chenxue, who was originally surrounded by black flames and brought towards Zhou Tianzong's figure, stopped under this pressure. Zhou Tianzong narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "Interesting. However, how much power can an ant like you, who has yet to reach the Saint Realm, bring out of a Saint artifact?" As he spoke, Zhou Tianzong flipped his right hand, and a writing brush with black flames appeared in his right palm. The brush was several feet long, and there was a wisp of black flame burning at the tip of the brush. The darkness in the flame seemed so profound and extraordinary. Black flame brush? The sect master actually used the dark flame brush. Is this hall really that extraordinary? Raiwa and Yen Ruhua looked at each other with shock in their eyes. The black flame brush was famous in the Burning Heaven sect. It was Zhou Tianzong's personal saint artifact, and its grade had reached the profound saint artifact level. Its power was vast and extremely terrifying. Zhou Tianzong would not easily reveal such a saint artifact. He would only use it when he encountered a strong opponent. There was no doubt that the hall that Zhuan had summoned was absolutely extraordinary. It made Zhou Tianzong so cautious. The Azure Dragon Hall's speed was extremely fast. It shot out explosively towards Mu Chenxue. Zhou Tianzong held the black flame brush in his hand and drew a line in the air. Endless black flames covered the sky and smashed down towards the Azure Dragon Hall. The moment the black flames reached the Azure Dragon Hall, the originally lifeless pale white dragon roared at the sky. It opened its mouth and spat out pale white flames. The black and white flames collided in the air and exploded into black and white colors. A terrifying temperature spread, and the entire land of the Divine Spectre realm was roasted. The divine river that traversed the entire Divine Spectre realm evaporated a lot of water vapor. The rapid flow of water evaporated almost half of it. The living beings in the Divine Spectre realm were also deeply affected. They all hid and looked at the black and white flames that covered the entire sky with reverence. As long as one was not a fool, one would know that this was the power of a saint. Only a saint could create such a terrifying destructive power. In the Divine Academy, other than the mysterious Underworld Peak and the mysterious Origin Peak, the other 7 Peak Masters were gathered together. The 7 of them had solemn gazes as they formed seals with their hands. Waves of energy burst out from their bodies. Outside the entire Excellent God Academy, an extremely terrifying and thick defensive barrier appeared. The energy ripples from a battle between saints were extremely terrifying. If they did not set up a defensive barrier in advance, just the aftershocks alone would be able to injure many disciples who were not strong enough. That's the sect leader of the Burning Heaven sect? When I saw the Burning Heaven sect's sect master, I didn't expect that even such an existence would come. The Peak Master of the Great Void Peak, Shi Tianhua, who was dressed as a Taoist, looked into the distance. When he saw the huge shadow formed by countless black flames, he could not help but exclaim in shock. Even the Burning Heaven sect's sect master has come. It seems that girl Mu Chenxue will definitely be brought back to the Burning Heaven sect. But what happened to that kid Zhuowen? The Peak Master of the Great Jade Peak, Xiaoyin, asked with her beautiful eyes slightly knitted. AI. Zhuowen and Chenxue are an extremely promising pair in the inner court. But speaking of which, the Burning Heaven sect behind that girl Chenxue is a bit stronger than the Blue Dragon Hall. I'm afraid that the Burning Heaven sect's sect master will not agree to their relationship. The carefree Lu Yuanhua shook his head, and a trace of a sigh appeared in his eyes. That hall was summoned by that kid Zhuowen? Soon, the attention of the 7 Peak Masters was focused on the Azure Dragon Hall that had burst out from the depths of the earth. They happened to see the pale flames spat out by the pale dragons around the Azure Dragon Hall collide with the black flames shot out by the black flame brush in Zhou Tianzong's hand. The 2 black and white cycled, forming an extremely terrifying mixed energy. To be able to fight against Zhou Tianzong, what level of sacred weapon is this hall? This Zhuowen actually has such a thing. The 7 Peak Masters were also shocked. They opened their mouths, not knowing what to say. Boom. The black flames and white flames were in a stalemate for a moment before they were completely annihilated. Jun, who was standing at the top of the Azure Dragon Hall, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was slightly pale. Kid, with your current cultivation, it's a bit difficult to support such a terrifying sacred weapon like the Azure Dragon Hall. I advise you to quickly stop and leave this place. With the Azure Dragon Hall, you can completely escape this place. In his mind, Xiao Hei's sigh sounded. We'll talk after I bring Chen Shui back. Zhuan said in a deep voice through gritted teeth. There was a trace of an unquestionable tone in his voice. Xiao Hei's voice froze, but seeing the stubbornness in Zhuan's eyes, she did not say anything else. However, it was very worried about Zhuan's current situation. Originally, Zhuan had already suffered heavy injuries, and now that he had to control a colossus like the Azure Dragon Palace, his consumption could be said to be extremely terrifying. So, the Azure Dragon Hall was like a hot knife through butter, quickly reaching Mu Chenshue's side. At this moment, Mu Chenshue was surrounded by countless black flames, unable to move at all. Oh! With a thought from Zhuan, the pale giant dragon spat out white flames again. These white flames surrounded Mu Chenshue's body, completely destroying the surrounding black flames. Chenshue! Zhuan's eyes lit up. His right hand reached out towards Mu Chenshue, wanting to firmly grab her. Boom! With an earth-shattering explosion, the Azure Dragon Hall suddenly shook violently. Zhuan staggered and the Azure Dragon Hall retreated, leaving the area where Mu Chenshue was. Little bastard, what qualifications do you have to touch my burning heaven sex saintess? Zhou Tianzong's eyes were indifferent. With a wave of his right hand, the black flame brush turned several hundred feet long and instantly charged into the Azure Dragon Hall. Drawing stroke after stroke in the air, the raging black flames burned, causing the Azure Dragon Hall to continuously retreat. Block it for me. Zhuan suppressed the injuries all over his body and poured power into the Azure Dragon Hall without any regard for his life. Instantly, the pale giant dragon seemed to have come alive. Its huge dragon body began to surge and white flames filled the air, blocking the attack of the black flame brush. However, Zhuan was not having a good time. Every time the black flame brush attacked, it would consume a lot of his energy, making him even worse. Zhuan! Mu Chenshue's face changed. She took a step forward and flew towards the Azure Dragon Hall. Earlier, when Zhuan activated the white flames, it had already completely unsealed the black flames on her body. Thus, she had also completely regained her freedom. Chenshue, come back! Zhou Tianzong's eyes flashed and a wisp of black flames shot out like a black python. It flew towards Mu Chenshue, wanting to imprison her again. I'm not going back! Mu Chenshue shouted. The golden flames around her body flew out in an attempt to resist the black flames. However, the golden flames in her body could not withstand a single blow from the black flames. In just an instant, it collapsed. Then, the black flames were like a snake that coiled around Mu Chenshue. Boom! However, when the black flames completely enveloped Mu Chenshue, a gust of wind suddenly swept over from the distance. Then, a hand grabbed Mu Chenshue's shoulder and brought her out of the range of the black flames. Who is it? The figure came quickly and left quickly. Like a gust of wind, he left the range of the black flames. Zhou Tianzong's eyes narrowed. His expression was extremely cold as he stared at the figure that had suddenly appeared. The figure was dressed in white. He was around 30 years old and had a handsome face. His eyes were as bright as the stars, shining brightly. Bush, 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 bush. Everyone's eyes gathered on the figure. However, most of their eyes were filled with doubt. Clearly, it was their first time seeing this person. However, when Zhuan, who was in the Azure Dragon Hall, saw the figure, his eyes suddenly lit up. He exclaimed in a low voice, "Father!" That's right. The middle-aged man who had suddenly appeared in front of him was Long Xiaotian, who had been trapped in the 18th level of the dungeon. When Zhuan had given the seal of the Law of Wind to Zhuan, he had left the Black Dragon Empire and headed to the 9 Netherworld realm. After several years, Long Xiaotian had finally made a breakthrough and successfully came out of the 18th level of the dungeon. Moreover, Zhuan also discovered that Long Xiaotian's aura was extremely strong. His body was filled with saint force. His cultivation had actually reached the profound sage realm. Your father's talent is not bad. Not only did he successfully comprehend the law of wind, but he also became a saint because of it, Xiao He said emotionally in his knowledge sea. Long Xiaotian smiled at Zhuan in the Azure Dragon Hall. He immediately let go of Mu Qinshue's right hand and carefully looked at Mu Qinshu. He nodded and said, "Not bad. My son has good taste. My future daughter-in-law is really beautiful." Mu Qinshue's beautiful eyes narrowed. She looked at Long Xiaotian with some doubt and said, "Senior, are you Zhuowen's father, Long Xiaotian?" Long Xiaoan laughed and said, "Little girl, you are very smart. However, I am not called Zhuo Xiaotian now, but Long Xiaoan. For you to do this for that boy Yun as his father, I am extremely gratified." Hearing this, Mu Qinshue's cheeks blushed and she said in a low voice, "Uncle is overpraising me. Actually, I didn't do anything. I didn't help Zhuowen in any way." Long Xiaotian waved his hand and said, "For now, let's go to the Azure Dragon Hall where Zhuowen is. This place is extremely dangerous, and we can't stay here for long." After saying this, Long Xiaotian grabbed Mu Qinshue's shoulder and the law of wind rushed out of his body. Then he brought Mu Qinshu to the Azure Dragon Hall like the wind. "You want to take young Miss Qinshu away? I think you're dreaming." Elder Raiwa coldly snorted and instantly blocked in front of Long Xiaoan. With a blast of his right hand, the law of fire condensed into a long spear that was 3 meters long. He suddenly threw it, stabbing at Long Xiaotian's vitals. Long Xiaotian was not afraid. He condensed the law of wind in his right hand and formed a wind shield in front of him. Bang! Long Xiaotian and Elder Raiwa both retreated several dozen steps. The law of wind that they had condensed just now also collapsed in the air. Fight! Elder Raiwa suddenly rushed in front of Long Xiaoan. The law of fire revolved around him, and like a storm, he threw punch after punch at Long Xiaoan. Long Xiaotian frowned slightly under Elder Raiwa's attack and retreated. The law of wind and the law of fire erupted, forming a terrifying storm. Swoosh! Chapter 1411. Controlling the Azure Dragon Hall, Qin Shui, you should return to the Burning Heaven sect with us. It's better not to mix with these people. Yen Ruhua's right hand formed a palm and with a burst of palm energy, he hit the back of Mu Qinshue's head. Mu Qinshue's body stiffened before she slowly fell to the ground and fainted. Yen Ruhua caught her. He controlled his strength very well and did not hurt Mu Qinshu in the slightest. "Ruhua, bring young Miss Qinshu to the sect master." Elder Raiwa suddenly shouted. Yen Ruhua nodded and took a step forward. The law of smoke and fire lingered around his legs as countless fireworks exploded. His speed instantly increased and he became as fast as lightning. Long Xiaotian frowned. He did not expect Yen Ruhua to take Mu Qinshu away at this moment. When thinking of this, Long Xiaotian took a step forward. Wind whistled around him as he moved at an extreme speed, trying to shake off Elder Raiwa in front of him. "You want to shake me off? No way." Elder Raiwa gave a cold laugh. He formed a seal with his right hand and flames formed a thick wall of fire in the sky, blocking in front of him. Two-headed nether dragon. Long Xiaotian roared and a dragon's roar came from within his body. A giant two-headed dragon that was several thousand feet long leaped out. Its body was filled with the aura of the netherworld as it blocked Elder Raiwa's path. Dragon soul? You're also a dragon soul cultivator? Elder Raiwa's pupils shrank. He threw a punch at the two-headed nether dragon. The wind from his fist exploded and flames filled the sky as they swept out. The two-headed nether dragon roared and swung its tail at Elder Raiwa's fist. With a loud explosion, both Elder Raiwa and the two-headed nether dragon were pushed back at the same time. On the other hand, Long Xiaotian's speed did not decrease at all as he threw out punch after punch. What made him frown slightly was that the wall of fire in front of him was extremely tough. His fists were actually unable to shake it. "You're just a guy who has just entered the profound sage realm. Do you really think that you can break the wall of fire I created?" When Elder Raiwa saw this scene, his eyes were full of ridicule. He was a peak profound sage, while Long Xiaotian had probably just broken through to the profound sage realm. There was still a gap between the two of them. He didn't think that Long Xiaotian could easily break through his firewall. Darkness. Long Xiaotian took a deep breath. He clenched his right hand, and a black hemisphere appeared in his palm. Then, he pressed his right hand against the wall of fire. This darkness spread out like a shadow, covering the entire wall of fire. Then, all the flames on the wall of fire were enveloped by the darkness and extinguished. Long Xiaotian indifferently spat out this word. Then, he slammed his right palm against the wall of fire, causing it to collapse. Long Xiaotian's momentum didn't decrease at all as he stepped out of the dust and turned into a gust of wind. This guy has mastered 2 kinds of laws? Elder Raiwa's pupils shrank, and he couldn't help but exclaim. The gap between a sage who had mastered 2 kinds of laws and a sage who had mastered 1 kind of law could be said to be very big. Although Long Xiaotian had just entered the profound sage realm, and Elder Raiwa was already at the peak of the profound sage realm, the former had comprehended 2 kinds of laws, while the latter had only comprehended 1 kind of law. Moreover, it was the ordinary law of fire. There was no doubt that the difference in strength between the 2 of them wouldn't be that big. On the contrary, Long Xiaotian might even have a certain advantage. After all, the law of darkness that he had comprehended was extraordinary. Damn it, how is this guy so fast? Yen Ruhua naturally felt the sound of something breaking through the air behind him. He turned his head slightly and saw Long Xiaolan rushing over from behind. He was shocked and said in a panic, "Sect Master, give me a hand." Zhou Tianzong, who was originally commanding the Black Flame Brush to attack the Azure Dragon Hall, naturally saw Yen Ruhua and Long Xiaotian chasing after each other. Zhou Tianzong's eyes flickered when he saw the 2-headed nether dragon. He said, "Another dragon soul cultivator?" Thinking of this, Zhou Tianzong waved his sleeve and separated a wisp of black flame, which flew toward Long Xiaolan. The black flame turned into a black light that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The black flame continued to burn, looking exceptionally terrifying. The black flame python was very fast, and it instantly arrived in front of Long Xiaotian, causing the latter's expression to change slightly. The law of darkness condensed in his right hand, forming a black blade that was several meters long. He fiercely slashed out and slashed at the black flame. Bang! As soon as the black blade and the black flame collided, Long Xiaotian's pupils shrank. A terrifying force came from his hands, and he was forced to retreat. The blood in his body boiled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Retreat! The black flame was too terrifying, and Long Xiaotian no longer dared to face it head-on. The law of wind gathered in his body, and he retreated like a gust of wind. His speed was extremely fast, and he managed to avoid the pursuit of the black flame. Dragon Soul Cultivator who became a saint through 2 laws. Your talent is not bad. What is your name? Zhou Tianzong controlled the Black Flame Brush to bombard the Azure Dragon Hall, and at the same time, reserved some strength to look at Long Xiaotian and asked indifferently. At this moment, Yen Ruhua had already brought Mu Chenxue to Zhou Tianzong's side. A terrifying black flame surrounded the 2 of them, protecting them in the middle. Zhou Xiaotian raised his head slightly and stared at Zhou Tianzong with hatred. He said, "Is Xiao okay?" Zhou Tianzong narrowed his eyes, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of an arc. He said, "So that's how it is. You are Long Xiaotian. In the past, I heard from Fenju and Fenri that the man Xiao fell in love with was from a lowly little dynasty, a small force that didn't even have the qualifications to enter the 9 netherworld realm. I really didn't expect that a dragon soul martial artist with the talent to become a saint like you would appear in such a lowly little force. It's truly extremely rare." Long Xiaotian's gaze was deep as he coldly said, "Let me ask you something. How is Xiao now?" The corner of Zhou Tianzong's mouth revealed a hint of ridicule as he said, "Thanks to you, Xiao has already been trapped in the burning flame tower for more than 20 years and has yet to come out. Speaking of which, I also have to thank you. If it wasn't for you, Xiao wouldn't have made such a big mistake, and I wouldn't have been able to inherit the position of sect master." Ha! Long Shan clenched his fists and said coldly, "Bastard, the news back then was exposed. I'm afraid it had an inseparable relationship with you, right?" Long Xiaotian appeared to be extremely calm. Although the Burning Heaven sect's holy maiden had privately fallen in love with someone else and had even given birth to a son, it had already violated the rules of the Burning Heaven sect. However, all of this had actually happened in the Azure Profound Empire, and Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao had concealed it very well. Although it was also related to the Azure Emperor still couldn't control the decision of the Burning Heaven sect. The only person who could control the decision of the Burning Heaven sect was Zhou Tianzong, who held a high position in the sect back then. Originally, the successor of the old sect master was going to be Feng Xiao, but because of such an incident, the Burning Heaven sect was in an uproar back then. Everyone opposed it, and in the end, the position of sect master fell into Zhou Tianzong's hands. Not long after the old sect master passed on the position, he passed away in the sect due to the end of his lifespan. After the old sect master passed away, Zhou Tianzong, in order to stabilize his position as sect master, used his authority as sect master to lock Feng Xiao in the Burning Flame Pagoda in order to prevent Feng Xiao from threatening his position. A scandal is a scandal. Since Xiao has such a scandal, it's wishful thinking for her to become sect master. Of course, I'm actually very grateful to you, Long Xiaon. In order to repay you, I'll make sure you don't die so miserably. Of course, I'll also let your son reunite with you in the underworld. Zhou Tianzong laughed sinisterly. With a wave of his sleeve, 2 more black flames flew towards Long Xiaon. Damn it. Long Xiaoyan's eyes were gloomy. He held the Law of Wind in his right hand and the Law of Darkness in his left. He waved his hand repeatedly to resist the 3 black flames. Puchi. However, the black flames were very powerful. After all, Long Xiaoyan had just entered the profound sage realm. After dozens of exchanges, he was directly hit by one of the black flames. His chest was burned into charcoal, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Long Xiaoyan. Zhou Tianzong laughed. The attacks of the 3 black flames became even more fierce, wanting to completely kill Long Xiaoyan. Father! Quickly enter the Azure Dragon Hall. Not far away, Duowen, who was controlling the Azure Dragon Hall, also saw the extremely miserable Long Xiaotian and couldn't help but call out to him. Long Xiaotian let out a muffled groan and rushed towards the Azure Dragon Hall where Zhuowen was located. However, how could Zhou Tianzong let Long Xiaoyan have his way? The black flames were like extremely tricky pythons. They repeatedly attacked Long Xiaotian through the gaps, causing Long Xiaotian to be exhausted. Nightfall. Long Xiaotian let out a low roar, and the Law of Darkness soared into the sky. In an instant, the surrounding thousands of kilometers fell into darkness, blocking one's vision. The 3 black flames that were attacking Long Xiaotian also lost their target. After the darkness slowly faded, Long Xiaotian leaped and called back the 2-headed nether dragon. He entered the Azure Dragon Hall and fell on the square in front of it in an extremely miserable state. Puchi. Long Xiaotian spat out another mouthful of blood. He violently gasped for breath, and his chest heaved up and down. Father, are you all right? Zhuan walked to Long Xiaotian with difficulty and asked in a deep voice. At this moment, Zhuowen's complexion was very ugly. It was almost bloodless, and the blood stain at the corner of his mouth was even more shocking. Long Xiaotian waved his hand, but he looked at Zhuowen with some worry and said, "Your complexion is very ugly. What happened to you?" This kid is using his power to control the Azure Dragon Hall, almost overloading it. How good can his complexion be? A dignified voice sounded, and then Xiao He floated beside Zhuan. Its body was also a little dim. Elder Raiwa's attack was also quite heavy. Long Xiaotian looked at Xiao He, but he didn't reveal the slightest surprise. He had already heard about the uniqueness of the dragon's soul from Zhuowen, so he didn't find it strange to see it speak human language. Then, I'm sorry. Father wasn't able to take Qin Shui back. Long Xiaotian said with some guilt. Zhuan shook his head and said with a faint smile, "It's all right. Leave Qin Shui's matter to me. Father, you should rest and take this pill." After saying this, Yuan flicked his finger and gave the Snow Lotus Jade lustrous pill to Long Xiaoyan. After doing this, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a firm look. He stared at the unconscious figure beside Zhou Tianzong and muttered in a low voice, I won't let the Burning Heavens sect take her away. Yun, you're already an arrow at the end of its flight. Don't act recklessly, or you'll really be finished. Xiao He angrily rebuked. Chapter 1412. The sky was torn apart. Cheng Huang, lend me a hand. Zhuowen's eyes were firm as he roared in a low voice. Suddenly, a large black cauldron flew out from between his brows. Cheng Huang was riding on the divine tortoise as he walked over step by step. He stared at Zhuowen with a complicated gaze. What a stubborn little guy. I can mobilize the energy of the Fushi cauldron to help you. However, you're facing a heavenly saint after all. If you can't defeat him in the end, you'd better give up, Cheng Huang said solemnly. I'll leave after I get Chen Shui back, Zhuowen said in a hoarse voice. Cheng Huang frowned and sighed softly. He did not say anything. He patted the Fushi cauldron with his little paw and a surge of energy gushed out and entered Zhuowen's body. Boom! In an instant, the power of the Azure Dragon Palace increased by another level. The giant pale dragon that was circling around the palace roared. Blazing pale white flames burned and spread in all directions. Bang! 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 The dark flame brush that was suppressed by the Azure Dragon Palace was pushed back by the sudden increase in power. The black flames on its surface were suppressed by the pale white flames. Zhou Tianzong's eyes narrowed. He did not expect the power of the Azure Dragon Palace to increase by so much. The dark flame brush was pushed back. It can suppress my dark flame brush? Could it be a celestial saint weapon? Zhou Tianzong's eyes were filled with shock. His dark flame brush was a heavenly saint weapon, but it was still suppressed by the Azure Dragon Palace. Furthermore, the Azure Dragon Palace was being controlled by Zhuowen, who had yet to become a saint. A saint artifact that could reach such a level had already surpassed the scope of a heavenly saint artifact. Only the legendary immortal saint artifacts could reach such a level. After all, Zhuowen did not have the saint energy that was unique to saints. Even if he had a saint weapon, he could only unleash a portion of its power. However, the palace was able to suppress the heavenly saint weapon, the dark flame brush, with just a portion of its power. The only reason for this was that the palace's grade was above the dark flame brush. Even if it could not unleash all of its power, it could still suppress the dark flame brush. Immortal sacred artifact? Yanji, Sapphire Shore, Jiangxian, Wenbai, and the two saints from the Blue Dragon Hall, Qing Hu and Qing Xiang, all stopped moving. When they heard Zhou Tianzong mention the celestial saint artifact, their bodies couldn't help but tremble in excitement. An immortal holy artifact was something that had never appeared in the Eastern lands. It was something that only existed in legends. Now that such a treasure had appeared in the hands of a cultivator who had yet to reach saint, it was a huge blow to them. It could even be said that it was a great temptation to them. If such a treasure was in the hands of a profound sage or sky sage, they would be apprehensive and might even consider whether it was worth it. However, in their eyes, mere cultivators who had yet to enter the saint realm were like ants. Possessing such a treasure was simply a disaster. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Yanji. Something like an immortal saint artifact has never appeared in our 9th netherworld realm. Don't tell me you don't want it? Sapphire Shore suddenly said to Yanji. The greed in his eyes had already reached the extreme. Yanji's eyes flickered and his brows furrowed. Without a doubt, he was indeed tempted. If the Divine Academy could obtain an immortal saint artifact, it would undoubtedly increase their strength by hundreds or even thousands. In fact, the Divine Academy could even rely on this immortal saint artifact to dominate the entire 9th netherworld realm, surpassing the Blue Dragon Hall and becoming the undisputed overlord of the 9th netherworld realm. Yanji, you don't have to hide it. I know you're also tempted. How about this? Let's join hands and attack together with Zhou Tianzong. After we eliminate that Zhuowen, we'll rely on our own abilities to obtain the immortal saint artifact. When the time comes, it will depend on our own strength and luck. Sapphire Shore chuckled. His words were filled with temptation. He was very clear about the allure of an immortal saint artifact. Even in the Central Plains, such an item would be fought over by countless experts, let alone in places like the Eastern Plains and the Southern Barbarian lands. Martial Uncle Yenji, don't listen to Sapphire Shore's words. After all, Yuan is a disciple of our Divine Academy. Moreover, if he grows up, he can also help our academy. Xiao Yu said anxiously. He was really afraid that Yenji would listen to Sapphire Shore's suggestion and join hands with him to eliminate Zhuoan and obtain the Azure Dragon Hall. After all, the allure of an immortal saint artifact was too great. Yenji took a deep breath. With a flip of his right hand, a dazzling golden token appeared in his palm. Ascended Saint Artifact, Dazzling Light Token? Hee, looks like you've agreed to my suggestion. Sapphire Shore was stunned for a moment before he chuckled. His laughter was filled with complacency. Boom. Yenji pinched the sword finger on his right hand and tapped on the surface of the Dazzling Light Token. The law of light poured in, and in an instant, the Dazzling Light Token exploded with blazing light. Bush, bush. Amidst the light of the Dazzling Light Token, the sound of the air being torn rang out. Numerous light arrows shot out, forming a space of light that enveloped Sapphire Shore from all directions. Sapphire Shore's face stiffened. With a wave of his sleeve, countless bolts of lightning surrounded him. Boom, boom. Light poured down and blasted onto those thunderbolts. An extremely terrifying explosive sound erupted. Soon after, the thunderbolts that surrounded Qing Yuan's body completely collapsed. Thud, thud, thud. Sapphire Shore retreated in an extremely wretched manner. He swung his hands and condensed terrifying laws of lightning to fend off the streaks of light. Old man Yenji, you old bastard! Sapphire Shore cursed angrily. With a flick of his finger, he took out a 10-foot-long scepter from his spirit ring. The top of the scepter was inlaid with a blue gem that flickered with lightning. The blue lightning constantly lingered around it, making it look deep and mysterious. Lightning punishment. Sapphire Shore coldly spat out this word. A thick bolt of lightning streaked across the sky. Soon after, the lightning seemed to have the effect of attracting lightning. Countless bolts of lightning were like silk threads that constantly spread out. Sapphire Shore was surrounded by countless bolts of lightning. His gaze was cold as he stared at Yenji before him. Rumble. As the light approached, it blasted onto the lightning threads. For a moment, there was a stalemate in the air. Lightning scepter? Yenji raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, "Looks like your actions have completely exposed your thoughts. Since that's the case, let's fight." Sapphire Shore's gaze was filled with anger. He smashed the scepter in his hand on the ground. Countless bolts of lightning gathered and formed a huge lightning shadow. Sapphire Shore stood on the shoulder of the lightning shadow and waved his hand vigorously. The disciples of my Jiaxin Academy will not be bullied by others. Even if you are Sapphire Shore, I will not allow it. Yenji roared. With 4 suns above his head and the dazzling light token in his hand, his body shone brightly like a saint. Sush. Elder Raiwa also rushed to Zhou Tianzong's side. He frowned slightly as he looked at the dark flame brush that was being suppressed. He said worriedly, "Sect Master, if this is really a divine artifact, the dark flame brush alone will not be able to suppress it." Zhou Tianzong floated in the air and looked down at the dark flame brush that was being suppressed by the Azure Dragon Hall. He said expressionlessly, "My original body will be here soon. My original body has also brought the Purple Flame Heavenly Blade." Purple Flame Heavenly Blade? Yen Ruhua and Elder Raiwa's pupils shrank to the size of needles. They were inexplicably shocked. The Purple Flame Heavenly Blade was also an Ascended Divine Artifact. Moreover, it was a higher-grade Ascended Divine Artifact than the Dark Flame Brush. It was the most precious treasure of the Burning Heaven sect. It was a powerful divine artifact passed down from generation to generation in the Burning Heaven sect. Zhou Tianzong's original body was even more terrifying. He had already reached the Sun-Sky Saint realm. With the Purple Flame Heavenly Blade and the power of the Dark Flame Brush, he could probably completely suppress the Azure Dragon Hall. However, what shocked Yen Ruhua and Elder Raiwa was that Zhou Tianzong had come all the way here with the Purple Flame Heavenly Blade. It was obvious that he attached great importance to this matter. "Soon. My original body will be here soon. Once he arrives, this divine artifact will belong to me." Zhou Tianzong snorted coldly. He stepped out of the void and came before the dark flame brush. He grasped his right hand and drew in the void. Countless black flames gushed out and formed various rare birds and beasts. These rare birds and beasts were formed by the black flames. They carried a unique divine aura and attacked the huge pale dragon on the surface of the Azure Dragon Hall from all directions. The pale dragon's power was monstrous. The pale flames on its surface seemed to be able to burn everything in the world. The rare birds and beasts formed by the black flames died instantly under the pale flames. However, Zhou Tianzong was not discouraged. He continued to draw in the void. The black flames he drew continuously rushed toward the Azure Dragon Hall like moths to a flame. What he needed now was not to defeat the Azure Dragon Hall, but to stall for time until his original body arrived. Boom! Boom! The power of the Ascended Saint artifact was too terrifying. Finally, with a loud explosion, the sky of the small world in the Divine Spectre realm was torn apart. The sky has been torn apart. Countless creatures in the Divine Spectre realm looked up and stared blankly at the shocking scene in the sky. They saw that the sky that should have been blue now had a huge crack that was tens of thousands of feet wide. It was as if a knife had cut a piece of blue cloth. Within the crack was endless darkness, as well as extraterrestrial meteorites that were born from the darkness. Everyone quickly hide. The power of these meteorites is terrifying. It is not something that ordinary martial artists can withstand. Meteorites from outer space fell from the crevice. As they fell, they emitted extremely terrifying flames due to the friction. The sky was densely covered with meteorites. It was as if a terrifying rain of fire had fallen from the Divine Spectre realm at this moment. Countless creatures in the Divine Spectre realm tried to hide. However, there were too many meteorites falling. It was impossible to avoid all of them. As a result, screams rang out one after another. The ground was riddled with holes by the meteorites. The divine river that ran through the entire Divine Spectre realm had completely dried up. It was a scene of doomsday. It's over. The Divine Spectre realm is over. The battle between saints is too terrifying. In the academy, the peak masters looked at the terrifying scene outside with horror in their eyes. Damn it. Sapphire Shore, go to 9 Nether Heaven to fight. Chapter 1413. 9 Nether Heaven. The essence of the 9 Nether realm was 9 small worlds. Before the 9 Nether realm was established, it was an illusory space. It was pitch black and had no substance, but the Yuan Qi was extremely rich. The 9 Nether realm was the core of the Eastern lands, and the Yuan Qi was the richest in the Eastern lands. Later on, the 9 saints arrived at this place. It was because of the dense spiritual energy here that they built 9 little worlds and developed them into 9 different forces. The 9 saints were the ancestors of the strongest forces in the 9 Nether realm, and they were extremely old. Therefore, there was an illusory space above the 9 Nether realm. This space was called the 9 Nether Heaven by the 9 Nether realm warriors. After Yen Ji left the divine Nether realm, Sapphire Shore narrowed his eyes, but he was not afraid and also entered the space. The 9 Nether Heaven might be a good battlefield. I can show off my skills there. Zhou Tianzong held the dark flame brush, took a step forward, and waved his sleeve. He led Yen Ruhua, Elder Raiwa, and Mu Chenxue into the crack in the sky. Zhuowen stood at the top of the Azure Dragon Hall, his eyes cold. The Azure Dragon Hall was lifted up by the pale white dragons and roared at the sky, following closely behind Zhou Tianzong. After the 4 left, the heavy atmosphere in the divine Nether realm relaxed a little. Qing Hu and Qing Xiang, who were fighting with Jiang Xian and Wen Bai, followed Sapphire Shore out of the divine Nether realm. Wen Bai, don't follow them. Fix the crack in the sky first, or the divine Nether realm will be destroyed. Wen Bai, who had a fiery temper, wanted to follow them. However, he was stopped by Jiang Xian. Wen Bai looked at the countless meteorites falling from the sky and nodded. Then, the 2 of them used their saint power to fix the huge crack in the sky. The 9 Nether Heaven was pitch black, and there was nothing around. In the pitch black space, 9 huge planets were arranged in a straight line in the void. A crack appeared on the surface of the second planet, and 2 figures came out of it. Of the two figures, one was holding a shining token, while the other was holding a scepter that was filled with lightning. The moment they flew out of the crack, the two of them began to fight. Light and lightning clashed, forming an extremely dazzling light in the void. Zhou Tianzong, who was holding a dark flame brush, and the huge azure dragon hall followed closely behind the two figures. 4 terrifying auras spread out, causing the atmosphere in the 9th underworld heaven to become much more solemn. The moment the 4 of them appeared in 9 nether heaven, all the living beings on the 9 planets floating in the void seemed to have sensed something, especially the powerful living beings in 9 nether realm. They seemed to have sensed something, and fear appeared in their eyes. Countless powerful creatures in the 9th Serenity realm used their divine abilities to look through the layers of mist and onto the 4 figures above the 9th Serenity sky. Heavenly Saint. When the attention of these creatures fell on Yanji and Sapphire Shore, many of them were surprised. Sapphire Shore, the ruler of the Dragon Nether realm, and Yanji, the ruler of the Divine Nether realm, were known by everyone in the 9th Serenity realm. They were considered to be the strongest among the 9 Nether realm saints. Yanji and Sapphire Shore are fighting? Did the Divine Nether realm and the Dragon Nether realm fall out? The 9 Nether realm saints discussed spiritually, but no one dared to come out and go to 9 Nether heaven. Both Yanji and Sapphire Shore had reached the level of Heavenly Saint. They couldn't interfere with the battle at all, so they could only watch from afar with their divine abilities. Zhou Tianzong? Zhou Tianzong, the leader of the Burning Heaven sect? Why has such an existence come to our 9 Nether realm? It really is Zhou Tianzong. His aura isn't strong, so he should be a law clone. But looking at the situation, he seems to be in a difficult situation. There's a palace behind Zhou Tianzong. The palace's aura is so strong. It's much stronger than a Heavenly Saint artifact. Could it be a saint artifact? Soon, the saint's attention fell on Zhou Tianzong, who was holding the dark fire brush. But when they saw Zhou Tianzong in a difficult situation, they were all shocked. Then, their gazes fell on the Azure Dragon Palace, which was chasing Zhou Tianzong. Their eyes were filled with shock. Zhou Tianzong was the leader of the Burning Heaven sect. He was quite famous among the Heavenly Armor Continent saints. Such an existence was actually being chased into such a sorry state by a palace. Only a celestial sage-level sacred artifact could chase a heavenly sage-level sacred artifact into such a sorry state. He actually has a saint artifact. What kind of existence can force Zhou Tianzong into such a situation? We have to find out. The 9 Nether Realm saints all looked fearful. Obviously, they thought that the master of the Azure Dragon Palace was an extraordinary figure. Hence, the gazes of all the saints landed on the figure standing in the Azure Dragon Hall. Immediately, all of them fell into silence. This was because the aura of the figure controlling the Azure Dragon Palace was not strong. Instead, it was extremely weak. 7th level Emperor Realm? Is it my imagination? He's only at the 7th level Emperor Realm, but he actually has such a powerful saint artifact. How did he do it? After a moment of silence, the saints burst into an uproar. Obviously, such a powerful saint artifact was in the hands of such a weak cultivator. It was a great contrast to the saints. What right does a guy who hasn't reached the saint realm have to possess a saint artifact? Suddenly, a cold voice came from the 9 Nether realm. It was ethereal. Yes, what right does a little guy who hasn't reached the saint realm have to possess such a saint artifact? It's a waste for it to fall into the hands of such a little guy. Divine thoughts spread out in the 9 Nether realm. Then, 5 stalwart figures rushed out from 5 of the 9 planets in the void. These 5 figures were surrounded by terrifying saint power, and they were all saints. Martial Nether Realms Saint Martial Sex Wu Ho, Flower Nether Realms 100 Flowers Parks by Meishing, Death Realms Undying Altars Undying Old Monster, Death Realms Assassin Alliance's Emperor, and Night Realms Yakshahai's Eternal Night Nether King. Zhou Tianzong retreated to the side. Naturally, he also noticed the 5 figures that suddenly appeared in the 9 Nether realm. His eyes narrowed as he coldly muttered, "Sect Master Zhou, this palace is not simple. It can actually force you to this extent. Do you need our help?" The Death Realm's undying old monster was a fierce-looking old man with a purple face. At this moment, he was speaking to Zhou Tianzong in a strange tone. Although the other four did not say anything, from the expression on their faces, it could be seen that their thoughts were similar to the undying old monsters. They all wanted a share of the pie. After all, no one wanted to let go of a saint artifact. You don't have to test it. This palace is just as you guessed. It's a saint artifact. I don't need to say anything about it, right? Zhou Tianzong smiled faintly. It's indeed a saint artifact. I didn't expect that such a treasure would be controlled by a 7th-level Emperor Ant. What a pity, the black iron-armored Wu Ho said indifferently. Just snatch it. How can a mere 7th-level Emperor overturn the heavens? The Imperial Exterminator said expressionlessly. The smile on Zhou Tianzong's face became even wider. It seems that everyone has the same idea. Then our goal is the same. Why don't we join forces to kill this kid first? At that time, this saint artifact will be ownerless. In the Azure Dragon Palace, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He did not expect that the other saints of the 9 Nether Realm would also participate. Now, things had become much more troublesome. Could 5 saints at the peak of the profound sage realm and Zhou Tianzong's heavenly saint powerhouse. You are no match for them. Even if you control the Azure Dragon Palace, you can't defeat 6 saints. You should leave now, Qing Huang said to Zhuowen with a frown. Bring Chen Shui back and I'll leave immediately. Zhuowen was unmoved. His eyes were filled with stubbornness. Undying old monster, Wu Ho by Mei Xing, Imperial Exterminator, Eternal Night Underworld Monarch, how about the 5 of you do me, Yan Ji, a favor and don't interfere in this matter. After this, my Divine Academy will reward you greatly. Not far away, Yan Ji, who was holding the dazzling light token, had an ugly expression as he spoke to the 5 saints. Can an old man's favor compare to a saint artifact? What a joke! Sapphire Shore sneered. Brother Yan Ji, although we really want to do you a favor, compared to the saint artifact, your favor is worthless, undying old monster said in a mocking tone. Boom! Zhou Tianzong's body was burning with black flames. He said indifferently, everyone, no need to talk nonsense. Let's attack together. Once we kill this kid, the saint artifact will become ownerless. At that time, everyone will have a chance to obtain the saint artifact. Sect Master Zhou is right. Let's join forces and end this quickly. A 7th-level Emperor Realm Ant is not worthy of such a treasure. The Imperial Exterminator nodded. He stretched out his right hand and pulled out a pitch-black short sword. Then, he hid in the void and disappeared like air. The League of Assassins specialized in the Tao of Assassins. Their concealment techniques were unparalleled in the world. The Imperial Exterminator was the leader of the League of Assassins. His concealment techniques had reached the point of perfection. Once he used his concealment techniques, even saints of the same level would find it difficult to detect him. Kill! The moment the Imperial Exterminator made his move, Undying Old Monster, by Mei Xing, Wu Ho and Eternal Night Underworld Monarch also took out their profound saint artifacts and surrounded the Azure Dragon Hall from all directions. The smile on Zhou Tianzong's face grew wider. Following the 5 of them, he drew out his black flame brush and black flames filled the sky. 6 attacks landed on the Azure Dragon Hall. The pale giant dragon roared at the sky and its body ignited with terrifying pale flames, blocking the attacks of the 6-Paths Saint. Boom! 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 The sound of explosions mixed with the dragon's roar resounded in the 9 Serenities heaven. The dragon's roar contained traces of sorrow. In the Azure Dragon Hall, Zhuowen's face grew paler and paler. He spat out a mouthful of blood, but his eyes were red and contained an unyielding spirit. Break! Chapter 14:14. Purple Flame Heavenly Blade, continue to attack. Zhou Tianzong said calmly, but the dark flame brush in his hand continued to draw in the void. Billowing black flames continued to surge out. The other 5 sages did not want to be outdone, and they all used their strongest attacks. In an instant, the 9 underworld sky was filled with sage aura, and all of them bombarded the Azure Dragon Hall. The pale dragon that was circling the Azure Dragon Hall cried out in grief. The pale flames on its body were completely extinguished, and its huge dragon body was riddled with holes under the attacks of the sages. Although this hall is very powerful and is an immortal saint artifact, how much power can a mere 7th-level Emperor Realm ant like you use? It's a waste for it to be in your hands. Zhou Tianzong smiled coldly, as if victory was already in his hands. Puchi Wen knelt on the ground with one knee. Blood spurted out of his body, and cracks appeared on the surface of his body. The attacks of the sages had given him too much pressure. His body could not take it and was about to collapse. However, Zhou did not care. His gaze was fixed on the unconscious figure not far behind Zhou Tianzong. He muttered in a low voice, "I will take you away." As he spoke, Zhou gritted his teeth and slowly stood up. Even if he was heavily injured, he still forcefully endured the pain and stood up like a towering mountain. Looking at that stubborn figure, Zhou Tianzong and the other saints' gazes turned cold. Zhuo Wen's willpower had moved them. Burning Heaven Sect, Blue Dragon Hall, Saint Martial Sect, 100 Flowers Park, Undying Altar, Assassin League, and Yakshasi. As long as I, Zhuan, do not die in the end, I will definitely turn your world upside down. Zhuo Wen's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the 6 saints in front of him. Zhou Tianzong narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "Turn the world upside down? Turn the world upside down? A mere 7th-level Emperor Realm ant dares to say such words? You must be dreaming." The other 5 sages also laughed out loud. Their smiles were filled with disdain and coldness. They did not take Zhuo Wen's words to heart at all. In their opinion, if Zhuo did not rely on the Azure Dragon Hall, an immortal sacred artifact, he would have died thousands of times already. Continue. As long as we continue to bombard him, just the aftershocks of the attacks will be enough to make him suffer. I don't believe that he can hold on for much longer, Zhou Tianzong said with a cold gaze. Boom, boom. The other 5 sages naturally had no objections. Although they all had their own ulterior motives, their current goal was surprisingly the same, and that was to kill Zhuo first. Long Xiaotian, help Zhuo. A ray of black light shot out and transformed into Xiaohei. He hurriedly shouted at Long Xiaotian, who was not far away from the square. Long Xiaotian nodded and stepped to Zhuo's side. He said to Xiaohei, "What do you need me to do? I'm not familiar with this hall at all." Place your hand on Zhuo's shoulder and channel your saint energy into the Azure Dragon Hall at the same time. You can use your saint energy to activate the Azure Dragon Hall and increase its power by several times. Next, I will help Zhuo convert your saint energy, Xiaohei said solemnly. Long Xiaotian nodded and placed his right hand on Zhuo's shoulder. Waves of saint energy flowed into Zhuo while Xiaohei stood on Zhuo's shoulder and silently helped Zhuo convert this saint energy. "Zhuo, are you all right?" Long Xiaotian looked at Zhuo worriedly and could not help but ask. However, Zhuo was unmoved. His gaze was fixed in the direction of Mu Chenxue. He was as motionless as a statue. This. Long Xiaotian's eyes narrowed as he turned to look at Xiaohei. This kid's consciousness is already starting to fade. The attacks of the saints are too terrifying. Even the aftershocks are not something this kid can withstand. If it wasn't for the obsession in his heart, he wouldn't even have the strength to stand. Xiaohei sighed and began to channel the saint energy that Long Xiaolun had surged into him. This kid, Long Xiaolun, had a complicated look in his eyes. Zhuan had told him about the Azure Dragon Hall before. He also knew that the Azure Dragon Hall that Zhuan controlled was a saint weapon. Everyone knew that a man's wealth was his own ruin. To be able to obtain a saint weapon, it could only be said that Zhuo's luck was heaven-defying. Zhuo, who possessed such a treasure, only needed enough time to become a saint. At that time, with such a saint weapon, he would not need to fear the heavenly saints. However, Zhuo, in order to get Mu Chenxue back, not only had he summoned the Azure Dragon Hall, he had not even flinched in the face of the 6 saints. In the end, his consciousness faded, but he was still standing. His gaze was fixed in the direction of Mu Chenxue. This kid's obsession with Mu Chenxue had reached an extremely terrifying level. Boom! With the infusion of Long Xiaoyan's saint energy, the surface of the Azure Dragon Hall shone brightly. The attack of Zhou Tianzong and the others immediately collapsed. The power of this hall is increasing. The undying old monster's eyes flickered. Zhou Tianzong narrowed his eyes and said, "It's Long Xiaotian who has injected his saint energy into this hall, causing its power to increase by several times." Sect leader Zhou, what should we do now? Wu Ho asked with a slightly ugly expression. Delay this hall. We must not let it escape. My original body will soon arrive at 9 Serenities Heaven. At that time, we will be able to completely destroy this hall. Zhou Tianzong said coldly. As soon as Zhou Tianzong said this, the other 5 people showed hesitation. They knew how powerful Zhou Tianzong's original body was. If Zhou Tianzong's original body arrived, the 5 of them would not be qualified to compete for the saint weapon. Perhaps noticing the 5 people's hesitation, Zhou Tianzong said indifferently, "If I'm not wrong, this hall may be the cave residence of a saint immortal expert. There must be other saint weapons inside. If the 5 of you help me delay this hall, I promise to give each of you a saint weapon. Otherwise, you won't get anything. I think everyone is smart." Hearing this, the 5 people looked at each other. In the end, the undying old monster gritted his teeth and said, "I'll help you." With the undying old monster taking the lead, the other 4 people were not very willing. However, this was indeed the only feasible method at the moment. After all, if the Azure Dragon Hall escaped, they would not be able to get any benefits. It was not worth it. Follow me to delay this hall. Zhou Tianzong revealed a smile at the corner of his mouth. Then, he led the 5 of them and surrounded the Azure Dragon Hall. Jun has lost consciousness. Let's hurry up and drive the Azure Dragon Hall away from this place. We can't delay here. Xiao He said to Long Xiaotian. Long Xiaotian nodded. Immediately, the saint energy in his body surged out and cooperated seamlessly with Xiao He. Under his control, the Azure Dragon Hall broke through the sky with a rumble. Stop it! Zhou Tianzong roared angrily and began to use the black flame brush desperately. The other 5 saints also worked extremely hard. For a moment, they really trapped the Azure Dragon Hall in place. They've trapped it, Long Xiaotian said with an ugly expression. Xiao He's eyes flickered. She sighed softly and said, "It seems that we can only sacrifice the Azure Dragon's origin." As she spoke, the huge pale dragon that was surrounding the Azure Dragon Hall suddenly left the hall. The huge dragon's body began to burn with terrifying pale flames as it pounced toward Zhou Tianzong and the other 5 people. Boom! Boundless pale flames erupted and spread throughout the pitch-black space of 9 Nether Heaven. Then, the pale flames burned more and more fiercely. It was like a sun in its twilight years that could explode at any time. The terrifying power generated by the spontaneous combustion of the huge pale dragon completely blocked Zhou Tianzong and the other 5 people. Go! Xiao He roared. Long Xiaotian did not dare to delay. His saint energy surged wildly. Immediately, the Azure Dragon Hall turned into a stream of light and rushed into the distance. Soon, it reached the edge of 9 Nether Heaven. Break through the void and leave 9 Nether Heaven. The Azure Dragon Hall's momentum did not diminish. It leaped up and shattered the spatial barrier at the edge of 9 Nether Heaven. Then, a huge crack appeared in the space as it tried to enter the spatial turbulence. "Want to leave? It's not that easy." A majestic roar came from the sky above 9 Nether Heaven. Then the space above collapsed in an instant. A stalwart figure, holding a long saber that was burning with purple flames, stepped through the air. It's Zhou Tianzong's real body. It's so powerful. The undying old monster, Wu Ho, and the other saints all looked at the figure. They were all shocked as they recognized the real identity of the figure. This was because the figure was holding the burning heaven sect's most precious treasure, the heavenly blade of purple flames. It was the best among the heavenly saint weapons and was much more powerful than the dark flame brush in the hands of Zhou Tianzong's doppelganger. Slash! Zhou Tianzong's real body looked indifferent. He raised the heavenly blade of purple flames in his right hand and slashed out. Suddenly, monstrous purple flames spread across the entire sky. In an instant, the entire pitch-black space of 9 nether heaven was covered by purple flames. The purple brilliance illuminated the void, making it look mysterious and distant. A terrifying, scorching feeling came. Amidst the terrifying purple flames, a sharp blade light, like a crescent moon, rapidly slashed towards the Azure Dragon Hall that was about to break through the air. Let's go! This heavenly blade of purple flames is too terrifying. I'm afraid it's a terrifying saint weapon that is infinitely close to an immortal saint weapon. Xiao He roared angrily. Without hesitation, he joined forces with Long Xiaotian to drive the Azure Dragon Hall. Then, the huge Azure Dragon Hall turned into a stream of flowing light and instantly entered the spatial crack. The moment the Azure Dragon Hall entered the spatial crack, the purple saber light had already arrived and slashed the spatial crack. Crack, crack. The sound of glass shattering continuously rang out. The spatial crack was directly slashed into pieces. Countless purple flames poured into the spatial crack like a flood. The speed of the purple flames was too fast. It followed the spatial crack and poured into the spatial turbulence. In an instant, the Azure Dragon Hall that had just arrived at the spatial turbulence was swept into it. Pucci! Long Xiaotian suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with shock. Zhou Tianzong's real body was so terrifying. Especially when combined with the heavenly blade of purple flames, its power had reached such a terrifying level. Let's go! Xiao He was also seriously injured by the purple flames. He roared angrily. The Azure Dragon Hall followed the spatial turbulence and quickly flew into the distance. Chapter 14-15. Suspicion, escaped? I was a step too late in the end. Zhou Tianzong stared at the spatial turbulence in front of him and frowned slightly. There was a trace of unwillingness in his eyes. Let's search again. Zhou Tianzong took a step forward and rushed into the depths of the spatial turbulence with the purple flame heavenly blade in his hand. After a while, he returned with an extremely ugly expression because the aura of the Azure Dragon Hall had disappeared in front of him. After he had flown a distance, he had no idea where to start. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Zhou Tianzong's clone led the 5 saints to the entrance of the spatial crack. When they saw the ugly expression on Zhou Tianzong's face, they guessed that the Azure Dragon Hall had probably escaped. Not far away, Sapphire Shore and Yan Ji stopped fighting. After discovering that Zhuowen's group had successfully escaped, Sapphire Shore's expression turned ugly, while Yan Ji let out a sigh of relief. Sect Master, what should we do now? Elder Raiwa and Yen Ruhua rushed in front of Zhou Tianzong and asked carefully. Return to the sect. After you return, send some spies to the 9 Netherworld realm. If there's any news about Zhuowen, report to me immediately, Zhou Tianzong said coldly. Yen Ruhua suddenly volunteered, Sect Master, why don't you let me and Elder Raiwa stay? It's said that there's an opportunity to become a saint in this 9 Netherworld conference. Zhou Tianzong was stunned for a moment before he nodded and said, Ruhua is right. The 2 of you should stay in the 9 Netherworld realm. This 9 Netherworld conference is indeed extraordinary. Ruhua is only half a step away from the saint realm. Perhaps she can obtain the opportunity to become a saint in the 9 Netherworld conference. As for that girl Chen Shui, I'll bring her back to the sect first. Remember, if there's any news about Zhuowen, you must tell me. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Yen Ruhua and Elder Raiwa's eyes turned cold. They bowed their heads and said respectfully, Sect Master, don't worry. We won't be careless about this matter. After giving a few more instructions, Zhou Tianzong brought Mu Chenxue and flew away. After Zhou Tianzong left, Sapphire Shore and the other 5 saints arrived beside Yen Ruhua and Elder Raiwa with smiles on their faces. The Burning Heaven sect was the overlord of the southern barbarians. It was even more powerful than the Blue Dragon Hall. Especially after witnessing the strength of Zhou Tianzong's main body, these saints wanted to befriend Yen Ruhua and Elder Raiwa. Brother Raiwa, nephew Ruhua, I heard that you're planning to participate in the 9 Underworld Conference, right? Sapphire Shore was the first to speak. Elder Raiwa smiled and said, That's right. It's said that there's an opportunity to become a saint in the 9 Underworld Conference. There's even the birth of Saint Luck. It's very beneficial to Ruhwa, so of course he's planning to participate. Brother Raiwa is right. There's indeed a Saint Luck in the 9 Underworld Conference. There's still 2 years until the 9 Underworld Conference. During this time, why don't the 2 of you come to my Dragon Underworld as guests? Sapphire Shore asked politely. As soon as these words came out, the other 5 saints' faces froze. They opened their mouths but were speechless. Sapphire Shore was the master of the Blue Dragon Hall. Whether it was strength or the force behind him, he was stronger than them. Although they wanted to invite Yen Ruhwa and Elder Raiwa to their underworld realms as guests, they couldn't do so. But since Qin Yuan had already taken the initiative to speak, they could only give up embarrassedly. Elder Raiwa was a little hesitant. Brother Raiwa, don't worry. Our Dragon Underworld will help you investigate Zhuowen. After all, that guy is a descendant of the Ryuka and has quite a bit of enmity with our Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shore said again. Elder Raiwa and Yen Ruhwa looked at each other, then nodded and said, it's hard to refuse Hall Master Qing's kindness. We'll just have to accept. Welcome. But before that, I'd like to remind everyone that the young man who has a saint artifact is called Jun. He's a disciple of the Divine Nether Realm's Divine Academy. Sapphire Shore suddenly glanced at Yenji and said, a disciple of the Divine Academy? No wonder Hall Master Qing would fight with Yenji. Undying Old Monster, Wu Ho, by Mei Xing, Eternal Night Dark King and the Imperial Exterminator looked at each other in dismay. Their gazes all fell on Yenji with unkind expressions. Then is it possible that Zhuowen will return to the Divine Nether Realm? If he does, I think Brother Yenji will protect that brat. Undying Old Monster said in a strange tone. That's obvious. After all, Zhuowen is a disciple of the Divine Academy. When he grows up in the future, coupled with the Saint Artifact, he will definitely help the Divine Nether Realm grow stronger. How can Yenji not protect him? The Imperial Exterminator sneered. Although Wu Ho, by Mei Xing and Eternal Night Dark King did not say anything, the expressions on their faces showed that their thoughts were the same as Undying Old Monster and the Imperial Exterminator. Yenji's face immediately became ugly. It was obvious that Sapphire Shore's words just now were intentional, in order to arouse the suspicions of the other 5 saints towards his Divine Nether Realm. I hope that everyone will pay attention to the movements of the Divine Nether Realm in the future. If the Divine Nether Realm really shows signs of protecting that little bastard Jun, I hope that everyone will not be lenient when the time comes. Sapphire Shore laughed coldly. Sapphire Shore, you old bastard? Yenji clenched his fists tightly, the veins on his forehead popping out. Brother Yenji, why are you in such a hurry? As long as you don't protect that Zhuowen, we won't make things difficult for you because of this. Undying Old Monster said with a faint smile. Yenji flicked his sleeve and left 9 Nether Heaven, returning to the Divine Nether Realm. Looking at Yenji's departing figure, Sapphire Shore's smile grew wider. He smiled at the 5 Undying Old Monster and said, I hope that the 5 of you will pay more attention to Zhuowen's movements. Of course, the Divine Nether Realm is very suspicious, so I hope that everyone will pay more attention to the Divine Nether Realm. Palace Master Qing is too polite. Even if you didn't say this, we would pay attention to it. The 5 saints said with a fake smile. That's for the best. Sapphire Shore smiled faintly, then waved at Elder Raiwa and Yen Ruhwa, saying, the 2 of you follow me to the Dragon Nether Realm. I will definitely treat you well. Very quickly, the saints of 9 Nether Heaven dispersed. However, the battle today spread throughout the 9 Nether Realm. A young man who had yet to become a saint had a legendary Celestial Saint weapon. With the Celestial Saint weapon, he fought against the saints. This young man's name was Jun. The more the rumor spread, the more intense it became. Almost every living thing in the 9 Nether Realms knew about it. The Demon Nether Realm was vast and filled with dense demonic chi. There were green mountains and clear waters, birdsong, fragrant flowers, blue sky, white clouds, and overlapping mountains. It was like a paradise on earth. In the center of this area stood an extremely large group of palaces. Above the palaces, there was a milky white fog that curled up like smoke. Many of the living beings living in the demon nether realm looked at the palaces with a hint of respect in their eyes. This was because the palaces were the only and strongest force in the demon nether realm, the demon god palace. In the demon god palace, there were many outstanding geniuses of the demon clan gathered. However, 3 years ago, a demon emperor who joined from outside the Nine Nether realm completely changed the situation of the demon god palace. This demon emperor's cultivation rose rapidly in a short period of time. He defeated countless geniuses of the demon clan and won the favor of the palace master of the demon god palace. He became an inner disciple of the demon god palace. In the demon god palace, those who were accepted as inner disciples by the palace master were all peerless geniuses. In the past 1,000 years, the palace master of the demon god palace had only accepted 2 inner disciples. Including this demon emperor, there were 3 in total. This showed how picky the palace master of the demon god palace was. At the core of the palaces, in the depths of the inner palace, there was a huge and beautiful palace. Senior Sister Yunren, what did you say? The shocking battle in the Nine Nether Heaven was caused by a young man called Juon? Are you sure that young man is called Juon? 2 beautiful figures stood in the palace. One of them had a beautiful face and a graceful figure. She had a pair of thin wings on her back and a pair of cute antennae on her head. The other beautiful figure was more mature and charming. She wore a dark red palace dress and had a pair of long and narrow phoenix eyes that were infinitely charming. Her figure was extremely hot and curvy. At this moment, the girl with the thin wings on her back had her hands on the shoulders of the girl with the phoenix eyes. She looked anxious. Woody, you seem a little strange today. Could it be that the youth called Zhuowen is your old flame? The plump woman called Yun Ran said rather mockingly. Woody's delicate face suddenly looked embarrassed. She said embarrassedly, he's not my old flame. He's a very good friend of mine. Senior Sister Yunren, what happened to Jun? He's your friend? It seems that your friend is not simple. He actually has an immortal sacred artifact. Such an item is enough to make all saints go crazy. Yunran said solemnly. He and I are only acquaintances. We don't have a very deep relationship. However, what happened to Juowen? Woody's beautiful eyes flickered as she continued to ask. Yunran nodded and said, I see. However, that Juowen is really something. It is said that the 5 saints of the Netherworld realm, Martial Netherworld realm, 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 and Netherworld realm all joined forces to attack Xuan. Despicable. The saints actually joined forces to attack a junior who has yet to become a saint. What happened after that? Woody clenched her fists. Her pretty face was filled with shock and anger. At the same time, she asked worriedly. Juon is also amazing. In the end, he managed to escape. However, I heard that all this was caused by a woman. It is said that the woman is called Mu Chenxue. She is the saintess of the Burning Heaven sect. In order to snatch Mu Chenxue back, Juon was even willing to fight against a saint. What an infatuated man. If only I had such a powerful and infatuated partner. Yunran's pretty face revealed a trace of yearning. Obviously, Zhuowen's willingness to fight against a saint for his lover had a great impact on her. Chapter 14:16. 3 months later, Mu Chenxue? Wu Dai's beautiful eyes flickered with sadness. She knew that Juon had gone to the Divine Nether Domain's Excellent Divinity Institute because of Mu Chenxue. However, she didn't expect that Juon would risk his life to fight a saint for Mu Chenxue. He even exposed his biggest secret, the immortal saint artifact. Junior Sister Wu Dai, don't you think it's romantic? Yun Ran hugged Wu Dai's shoulder and giggled. Wu Dai smiled and said, yes. It's romantic, but I don't know where Juon went in the end. Yun Ran shook her head and said, I don't know. It's said that the Dragon Nether Domain is leading the search. The other Nether Domains are also looking for Juon, but they haven't found any clues yet. Wu Dai nodded, and a trace of relief appeared in her beautiful eyes. It was good that Juon had escaped. Junior Sister Wu Dai, the Nine Serenities Conference is about to begin. It's said that Saint Luck has appeared in the Nine Serenities Conference. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us. We have to fight for a trace of Saint Luck and become a saint, Yun Ran said with a smile. Wu Dai nodded and said with a smile, Senior sister, don't worry. I'll make good use of the Nine Serenities Conference. That's good. You're the disciple with the greatest potential in the Demon God Palace in recent years. You'll probably shine in the Nine Serenities Conference. I have high hopes for you. Yun Ran patted Wu Dai's shoulder. After chatting for a while, she left the palace. Master will definitely go to the Nine Serenities Conference. Maybe I'll be able to see Master again there. This time, I'll definitely work hard to cultivate so that I can help Master. Wu Dai muttered in a low voice. Then, she turned around and entered the depths of the palace. Outside the Nine Serenities realm, at the end of the Sea of Misery, a thumb-sized black light shot out and landed in the Sea of Misery. If one looked closely, the thumb-sized black light was actually in the shape of a palace. It was as though the palace had been shrunk infinitely. That was so dangerous. If I hadn't shrunk the Azure Dragon Hall in advance, concealed my aura, and drifted with the flow of the spatial turbulence, I'm afraid that Zhou Tianzong really might have caught up. On the square of the Azure Dragon Hall, Xiao He sighed softly and could not help but mutter to herself. Not far away from Xiao He, Long Xiaotian released his right hand from Zhuowen's shoulder. His legs went weak, and he almost fell to his knees. His chest heaved up and down, and his breathing quickened. Just now they had really walked through the gates of hell. Now that he thought about it, he felt a lingering fear. Zhuowen was still standing in the square like a statue, motionless. His posture was still that of looking up. This kid has completely lost consciousness. His injuries are too serious. Xiao He landed on Zhuowen's shoulder and placed her little paws on his neck. She could not help but sigh deeply. Hearing that, Long Xiaotian's eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Even if he had lost consciousness, he was still standing there like a statue. How tenacious of a will was this? At the same time, Long Xiaotian felt somewhat proud. Every father wanted their son to become a dragon. Zhuowen's will was so tenacious that he knew that Zhuowen's future achievements were limitless. In addition, Yuan possessed a supreme treasure like the Azure Dragon Hall. It probably would not take long for him to surpass his father. Cheng Huang, Yuan has lost consciousness. Help him recover. I need to control the Azure Dragon Hall and hide it. Right now, I'm afraid everyone in the Ninth Netherworld realm knows that Tun has an immortal sacred artifact. They're probably all looking for Zhuowen. Xiao He suddenly said. Immediately, a dim light shot out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows, revealing the appearance of the Fushi Cauldron. Meanwhile, Cheng Huang leisurely sat on the back of the divine turtle. Zhuowen is indeed putting his life on the line. Although his injuries are very serious, there is no danger to his life. However, I'm afraid that it will take quite some time for him to recover. Cheng Huang looked at the figure that was still standing and frowned. Xiao He frowned and said, Then can you wake him up? I'll try. Cheng Huang frowned and landed on Zhuowen's shoulder. It placed its furry paws on Zhuowen's neck to check. This kid's aura is rather chaotic. He has fallen into a deep coma. Even with the power of the Fushi Cauldron, it will probably take a few months. Xiao He was startled and immediately said, Then let's wait a few months. I plan to place the Azure Dragon Hall in the depths of the Sea of Misery. The Sea of Misery is so vast that even a saint would find it like searching for a needle in a haystack. That's a good idea. I'll take care of this kid's injuries. I'll leave the rest to you. As Cheng Huang spoke, a wisp of yellow light gushed out of its paws and entered the meridians on Zhuowen's neck. The latter's body trembled and he instinctively frowned. The depths of the Sea of Misery. Xiao He nodded. Immediately, the Azure Dragon Hall sank into the depths of the Sea of Misery. Although the Sea of Misery was extremely terrifying, it was only relative. Even a high-level martial emperor could fly freely in the Sea of Misery, let alone a saint. The Azure Dragon Hall was an immortal saint artifact. Even if it went deep into the Sea of Misery, there was probably nothing that could threaten it. After all, the hall had once withstood the combined attack of 6 saints. The water of the Sea of Misery is pitch black like ink. I originally thought that there were no living creatures in it. I didn't expect that I was wrong. In the square, Long Xiaoyan looked at the scene in the Sea of Misery through the light screen outside the Azure Dragon Hall. He discovered that there was a considerable number of fish swimming in the Sea of Misery. However, these fish were extremely strange. They were more than 10 feet long, larger than a person. Their eyes were red and they had sharp fangs. They exuded a ferocious aura. These are mutated fish, strange creatures born in the Sea of Misery. There are a large number of them in the Sea of Misery and they travel in groups. If a high-level martial emperor encountered these mutated fish, it would be extremely troublesome, Xiao He explained. Boom, boom, boom. Perhaps because they had discovered the Azure Dragon Hall, these mutated fish's eyes erupted with terrifying red light. Then, they fearlessly flew toward the Azure Dragon Hall. Violent collisions rang out continuously. You're overestimating yourselves. Xiao He sneered. A wave of Saint Aura spread out from the Azure Dragon Hall. Immediately, the mutated fish nearby exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The mutated fish further away screeched and fled into the distance, not daring to approach the Azure Dragon Hall. The Saint Aura of an immortal saint artifact was extremely powerful. Even if it was just a wisp, it was not something that these mutated fish could withstand. About 2 hours later, the Azure Dragon Hall finally landed at the bottom of the Sea of Misery. At the bottom of the Sea of Misery, reefs stood in great numbers and sand was deposited. The Azure Dragon Hall was only the size of a thumb. Mixed in with the sand and rocks, it looked extremely inconspicuous. Now, we just have to wait for Zhuan to wake up. After doing all this, Xiao He looked at the figure not far away and sighed softly. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. During these 3 months, the 9th Netherworld realm was extremely lively. The rumors about Zhuan did not die down with time. Instead, they became more and more intense. A little fellow who had not entered the Saint realm actually possessed an immortal saint artifact. This news had spread throughout the 9th Netherworld realm. In addition to the elite warriors sent by the major forces to search, there were also many rogue cultivators who spontaneously searched for Zhuan in the 9th Netherworld realm. Of course, the reason why the rumors about Zhuan were so popular was naturally because of the Blue Dragon Hall. It was said that not only did the Blue Dragon Hall release all the information about Zhuan, they even released his portrait. Therefore, although many warriors in the 9th Netherworld realm had never seen Zhuan in person, they all knew what Zhuan looked like. In the Divine Nether realm, the sky that was originally torn apart was finally completely repaired after the efforts of Jiang Xian and Wenbai. The divine river that ran through the entire divine nether realm was restored under Yan Ji's divine ability. However, this could not hide the fact that the divine nether realm was in a decline. The great battle last time had a great impact on the divine nether realm. Almost 70% of the living beings in the divine nether realm had died. It was a disastrous loss. The mountain range where the Divine Nether Academy was located was in an even worse state. If not for the Peak Masters raising the protective barrier in advance to protect the Academy, the disciples of the Academy would have suffered a disastrous loss. Sapphire Shore is too much. Within the Academy, Yan Ji smashed his fist on the table beside the armrest, his face extremely gloomy. In the room that Yan Ji was in, Jiang Xian and Wenbai were sitting at the same time. Other than them, the Peak Masters of the 9 Peaks were also seated below. Sapphire Shore definitely did it on purpose. He released all the information about Zhuan and emphasized that Zhuan is a disciple of our Divine Nether Academy. He also continuously spread rumors, causing our Divine Nether realm to be targeted by other Nether realm forces. Jiang Xian sighed. Sigh. Zhuan's whereabouts are also unknown. Martial Uncle Yan Ji, what should we do now? We can't ignore Zhuan. He is the second existence after Yuan Ji to comprehend the void immortal scripture. If he becomes a saint in the end, he will definitely be the second Yuan Ji. Xiao Yu suddenly said. The news of Zhuan successfully comprehending the void law had long spread throughout the academy. However, it was a pity that Zhuan's whereabouts were unknown, and his life and death were unknown. Xiao Yu, now that our divine nether realm is being watched by the other nether realms, do you think we have the chance to send people out to find Zhuan? Old man Tiandu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Furthermore, 3 months have passed. The other nether realms led by the dragon nether realm are all searching for Zhuan, but there are no results. It can be seen that Zhuan should be hiding in an extremely secretive place. His life should not be in danger. Tiandu is right. If we go to find Zhuan now, we will undoubtedly be caught by the Sapphire Shore. Furthermore, even if we find Zhuan, I'm afraid that Zhuan's location will be exposed. Yan Ji nodded in agreement. Xiao Yu said somewhat unwillingly, can we only sit and wait for death? Chapter 14:17. Saint's specific cultivation stage. The sea of misery was pitch black. However, when these fish passed by a pile of sand near a reef, they would hurriedly avoid it. It was as if there was some kind of primordial beast in the sand. If one looked carefully, this pile of sand and rocks was very unusual. Its surroundings were actually faintly suffused with a terrifying pressure. It was the presence of this pressure that scared the nearby mutated fish into fleeing in panic. In the depths of the sand pile, a palace the size of a thumb stood quietly. It was extremely inconspicuous. There was a huge square outside the palace. Long Xiaotian, who was sitting cross-legged, slowly opened his eyes. His gaze fell on the figure standing in the square in front of him. He frowned and said, "It's already been 3 months. Is Zhuan still not awake? It should be soon." Cheng Huang has never been one to boast. 3 months should be about right. Xiao He floated not far from Long Xiaotian and continued, "Once this kid wakes up, he can bring us into the Azure Dragon Hall." As soon as Xiao He finished speaking, a surging aura suddenly erupted from the figure standing not far away. A muffled, thunderous sound was heard. Then, Zhuan slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were bursting with a brilliant light that was difficult to look at. Moreover, Zhuan's aura was becoming more and more powerful. In the end, it gathered behind him into a storm that soared into the sky. At the same time, Zhuan's aura had undergone a qualitative leap. It was much stronger than before. This kid has broken through and reached the 8th level Martial Emperor realm. Xiao He and Long Xiaotian looked at each other. They could see the joy in each other's eyes. Cheng Huang took the Fushi cauldron and retreated to Xiao He's side. Its eyes were a little tired. It was obvious that it had exhausted a lot of energy to wake Zhuan up. After Zhuan opened his eyes, there was a trace of confusion in his eyes. He looked around and opened his mouth. He said dryly, "Has Chen Shui left?" Long Xiaonan and Xiao He came to Zhuan's side. They looked at Zhuan's appearance and sighed. "Then, I'm sorry. I can't keep that girl Chen Shui for you," Long Xiaotian said guiltily. Zhuan shook his head and said, "Father, there's no need to blame yourself. You can't be blamed for this. She is too strong." "Then you'll..." In an instant, the atmosphere between the father and son became solemn and silent. "The two of you don't have to feel sorry for yourselves. What you need to do now is to work hard to improve yourselves. When you are strong, you can do whatever you want. If you don't have the strength, it's useless no matter how much you dream." Xiao He suddenly reminded, "Let's enter the Azure Dragon Hall. I want to break through the 3rd floor and unlock more functions of the Azure Dragon Hall." Zhuan suddenly said firmly. After facing the encirclement of Zhou Tianzong and the other saints, Zhuan felt the importance of strength. If he was strong enough back then, how could Zhou Tianzong and the other saints of the Nether Realm dare to join hands to deal with him? They would not object to the matter between him and Mu Chenxue. The 3rd floor of the Azure Dragon Hall? That's not easy to break through. You have to think carefully. Xiao He narrowed her eyes and cautiously reminded him. "Of course I've thought it through," Zhuan said seriously. "In that case, let's enter the Azure Dragon Hall first." Xiao He did not object. Although Zhuan's cultivation was only at the 8th level Martial Emperor realm, his battle strength was extremely terrifying. An ordinary half-saint was no match for him at all. Even a powerful half-saint like Yan Ruhua, who had mastered 2 laws, was defeated by Zhuan. Zhuan was indeed qualified to break through the 3rd floor. With that, Zhuan took out the Azure Dragon token. With a thought, a beam of light descended and immediately enveloped Zhuan, Long Xiaotian, Xiao He, and Qing Huang. The moment the beam of light was about to disappear from the square, Zhuan looked into the distance and muttered in a low voice, "Blue Dragon Hall, Saint Martial Sect, 100 Blossoms Park, Undying Altar, League of Assassins, and Yakshasi. I will come to the 9 Serenities Conference. When the 9 Serenities Conference arrives, it will be the time for me, Zhuan, to take my revenge. Just you wait." Whoosh! The beam of light flashed, and Zhuan and the others disappeared from the square. When Zhuan opened his eyes, he found that he was in a dense forest. Long Xiaotian was standing not far from him. As for Qing Huang and Xiao He, they had entered his sea of consciousness the moment they entered the Azure Dragon Hall. Dozens of miles in front of the forest, there was the outline of a city. Zhuan could even see the traces of bricks and tiles on the city's surface. This is the interior of the Azure Dragon Hall? This is a small world, and the Yuan Qi is much more abundant than outside. Long Xiaonan looked around and couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. This is the second world of the Azure Dragon Hall's 3 worlds. Furthermore, it contains a powerful law of time. 1 day outside is 1 year inside. Furthermore, it does not affect the lifespan of the foreign martial artists. Zhuowen said with a faint smile. A day outside is a year inside, and it doesn't affect the life of the foreign cultivator. This is unbelievable, isn't it? Long Xiaoyan was shocked and couldn't help but mutter to himself. Father, let's go. According to the time we've spent in the outside world, 1,000 years have passed in the second world. I wonder how the Ryuka has developed. As Zhuowen spoke, he led Long Xiaotian towards the city in front of him. Long Xiaonan also came back to his senses and said with some doubt, "The Ryuka have stayed in this space for nearly 1,000 years. I'm afraid that a large number of geniuses have emerged. Maybe there are already some amazing geniuses who have broken through to become saints." Zhuan shook his head and said, "It's almost impossible to break through to become a saint in the second world. Father, carefully sense this world." Long Xiaotian was stunned. He immediately followed Zhuowen's instructions and silently sensed the world. Soon after, his eyes were filled with shock and he said, "There are no laws of heaven and earth in this world?" Without the laws of heaven and earth, cultivators can't comprehend their own Saint Rune laws from the laws of heaven and earth. Therefore, in the second world, even monstrous geniuses can only reach the 9th stage of the Emperor realm. Even invincible Emperor Lords can't break through. Zhuowen said with a bitter smile. So that's how it is. It seems that in this world, Ryuka should be able to produce some 9th stage Emperor realm geniuses. If these geniuses can come into contact with the laws of heaven and earth, I'm afraid they can quickly become invincible Emperor Lords. Long Xiaotian said with a smile. Zhuan nodded and immediately continued, "Father, you've already become a profound sage. I wonder if you can tell me more about the specific realms of saints?" When he was in the Emperor's tomb, Zhuan had already learned that the so-called saints were divided into 3 major realms, namely the profound sage, the heaven sage, and the immortal sage. However, as his cultivation increased, Zhuan found that these 3 realms were divided into smaller realms. He didn't know much about this, so he asked this question at this moment. "You haven't reached the sage realm yet, so you naturally don't know much about this. I'll explain it to you in detail." Long Xiaotian didn't refuse and explained the specific realms of saints to Zhuowen very carefully. You should know about the 3 major realms of profound sage, heaven sage, and immortal sage, right? In fact, there is another name for these 3 realms. They are the 5 profound sage realm, the 4 heavenly sage realm, and the 3 immortal sage realm. The so-called 5 profound sage realm, as the name suggests, is divided into 5 small realms in the profound sage realm, namely the profound void realm, the profound nirvana realm, the profound prying realm, the profound purifying realm, and the profound shattering realm. Similarly, the 4 heavenly sage realm is divided into 4 small realms, namely the yin heaven realm, the yang heaven realm, the empty heaven realm, and the heaven-defying realm. The 3 immortal sage realm is divided into 3 small realms, namely the earth immortal realm, the heaven immortal realm, and the true immortal realm. These are the specific divisions of saints. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of understanding. Back then, he had also learned about the specific realms of saints from the words of Sapphire Shore and Yanji, which was why he asked this question. At the same time, he could also guess that Yanji had just become a heaven sage and should be in the heaven sage realm. Although Sapphire Shore had become a heaven sage a long time ago, he didn't particularly suppress Yanji in battle, so he should also be in the heaven sage realm. The strength of the burning heaven sect master, Zhou Tianzong, was very terrifying. Just his law avatar alone had the strength of Sapphire Shore and Yanji, so his cultivation was probably above Yanji and Sapphire Shore, reaching the heaven sage realm. Even if there is a difference of a small realm between saints, there is a huge difference in their battle strength. If it weren't for the fact that I grasped two types of law, I wouldn't have been Raiwa's opponent. Long Xiaotian smiled bitterly. The two of them chatted as they walked. During this process, Yun also learned many things about saints from Long Xiaoyun. The biggest difference between the saint realm and the emperor realm was that saints already possessed saint force. Their saint force was much more vigorous and powerful than the star force of an emperor realm cultivator. Moreover, the saint force of a saint was condensed with the power of the law that they had comprehended. Its power was vast and mighty, completely incomparable to an emperor realm cultivator. Around half an hour later, Yun and Long Xiaotian arrived at the city gates. Only then did they discover that the rather grand city before them was called the Black Dragon City. What a coincidence! If I'm not wrong, the Black Dragon City should be the city where the Ryuka headquarters are. Perhaps grandfather and the others are in this city. Zhuan smiled at Long Xiaoyun, causing the latter to become rather excited. Of course, there was also a hint of guilt in his excitement. Chapter 14:18. Ryuka. After 1,000 years, the second heaven was originally called the Pang Great World. Zhuan had left the Black Dragon Palace for almost 3 years, and it had changed a lot. Especially the Black Dragon City. It was built very majestically, and it covered a vast area that stretched as far as the eye could see. Zhuan didn't feel it when he was far away, but now that he was closer, he was deeply impressed. The Black Dragon City was really big. Zhuan even saw a huge black dragon in the center of the Black Dragon City. This black dragon was close to 1,000 feet long. Its body was covered in rows upon rows of dark dragon scales that emitted a cold light. It was lifelike and extremely domineering. It floated in the air and looked down at the entire Black Dragon City, as if it could see everything. If one were to take a closer look, this black dragon was not a real dragon, but a huge dragon-shaped building. From the head to the tail of the dragon, there were many pavilions hidden in it, and the levels were clearly defined. There was a long flight of stairs on top of the dragon's spine. From time to time, there were people walking in groups of 3 to 5. That's the core of the Black Dragon City, the Black Dragon Tower. Only Ryuka people are qualified to live in it. It's said that a powerful Ryuka person opened up a huge dragon vein under the Black Dragon Tower. Therefore, the Black Dragon Tower is surrounded by dense dragon vein energy. Cultivating in the Black Dragon Tower is several times faster than cultivating outside. I'm so envious. It would be great if I could join the Ryuka. It's difficult. The Ryuka is the ruler of this land. They have developed for almost 1,000 years, and they have countless disciples. The threshold to join is also terrifyingly high. Let's not think about it. At the entrance of the Black Dragon City, there was a huge crowd of people and carriages, and it was extremely crowded. At the same time, there were bursts of discussion. Most of the warriors who planned to enter the Black Dragon City were looking at the sky above the Black Dragon City with envy, looking at the enormous Black Dragon building overlooking the earth. Zhuan and Long Xiaotian quietly lined up at the back of the queue. When they heard the discussions around them, the two of them exchanged glances and saw a trace of a smile in each other's eyes. The two of them did not expect the Ryuka to develop to such a stage and become the ruler of this land. However, when they thought about how close to 1,000 years had passed here, the two of them felt a lot more at ease. After all, Zhuan had already helped Ryuka unify the 7 prefectures. As long as the Ryuka didn't do anything stupid, It would be strange if they couldn't dominate this land after 1,000 years of development. I wonder how grandfather, Elder Shi Yuan and the rest are doing now. Zhuan muttered softly, and there was a tinge of anticipation in his eyes. Long Xiaolon was so excited that his whole body was trembling. He hadn't seen his father, Zhuo Xiangding, and the Zhuo family for more than 20 years. Now that they were about to meet again, even though Long Xiaotian had become a powerful saint, he still couldn't calm down. After waiting for a long time, it was finally Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian's turn. After paying a certain amount of spiritual stones, the two of them entered the Black Dragon City. The Black Dragon City was huge. Behind the city gate was a bluestone paved road that was extremely wide on both sides and could accommodate 8 horses running side by side. The flow of people inside was even more terrifying. Fortunately, the two sides of the road were very wide, so it didn't seem crowded. Without exception, the warriors in the city looked at the Black Dragon Tower in the center of the city with eyes full of awe. That was the core of the Black Dragon City. The warriors who could enter the Black Dragon Tower were all geniuses and elites. It was impossible for ordinary people to enter. There is a stone statue in the Black Dragon Tower. From the looks of it, it should be you, right? Long Xiaotian suddenly pointed to a stone statue in front of the Black Dragon Tower and said with a smile. Zhuan touched his nose. He naturally knew about this stone statue. It was built by Zhuo Xiangding and the others when the Black Dragon City was first established. The purpose was naturally to commemorate Zhuowen's help in unifying the 7 prefectures of the Ryuka. At this moment, Yuan even noticed that there were many people gathered around the stone statue. In the middle of the crowd, there was a young girl in black clothes. This young girl was no more than 17 or 18 years old. Her eyes were like limpid autumn water, full of life. She looked youthful and beautiful. The black tight clothes on her body perfectly outlined her beautiful figure. Under the stone statue, it formed a beautiful scenery. Miss Long Qijin is going to tell the story of Long Wen again. I remember that this is the 99th time she has told a story under the stone statue, and every time she tells the story of Long Wen unifying the 7 prefectures. Although the story of Long Wen is very familiar to us, I heard that after helping the Ryuka unify the 7 prefectures, Long Wen never appeared again. No one knows where he went. Long Wen's strength is terrifying. 1,000 years ago, he killed a mid-level emperor. Now that 1,000 years have passed, he must have reached the high-level emperor realm. Maybe he has entered the upper world. That's not very likely. The strongest person in the Ryuka now is Long Xiaotian. His cultivation is still at the 9th level emperor realm. He has challenged the guardian of the upper world many times, but he has lost every time. Long Wen is very strong, but he is not stronger than the guardian. I'm afraid he is in seclusion somewhere. Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian followed the crowd. When they gathered around the stone statue, they heard the discussions around them. Soon, they knew the identity of the young girl standing under the stone statue. Her name was Long Qijin. It was said that she was the daughter of the strongest person in the Ryuka, Long Xiaodun. She was very talented. She was only 17 years old, but her cultivation was already at the peak of the Heavenly Master realm. She was only a step away from the Emperor realm. The person she admired the most was Long Wen, who had helped the Ryuka unify the 7 prefectures. She was obviously a big fan of Long Wen. After all, Long Wen was more powerful than Long Xiaotian back then. Furthermore, this little girl was extremely gossipy. In the Long family, she had obtained a lot of information regarding Long Wen from many of the Long family's people. After that, she started to worship Long Wen uncontrollably. Yun, this little girl is a big fan of yours. She knows so much about your deeds. Long Xiaotian looked at Long Qijin, who was narrating Zhuowen's deeds vividly. He could not help but tease Zhuowen. Soon, Long Qijin was almost done narrating Long Wen's deeds. Then, she pointed to the stone statue behind her and said to the crowd, "Everyone, if you see someone who looks like this stone statue in the future, you must stop him and report to me. I will definitely reward you handsomely." When these words came out, the crowd smiled. They did not care much about Long Qijin's words. Long Wen had disappeared for almost 1,000 years. If they could find him, they would have found him long ago. Clap, clap, clap. Suddenly, a loud applause sounded. Then, a handsome young man in luxurious clothes walked out from the crowd. He looked at Long Qijin with a smile and said, "Miss Long, your story is really good. No wonder you are my dream lover." It's the young master of the Lan family, Lan Ka. Although the Lan family is not as powerful as the Ryuka, their influence is great. This is because the Lan family controls 80% of the wealth in the Pang Great World. They are so rich that they can rival a country. That's right. The Lan family's power is complicated and deeply rooted. Even the Ryuka has not touched the Lan family. This young master of the Lan family, Lan Ka, is a rare genius. It is said that he is only 25 years old and has already reached the peak of the 6th-level Emperor realm. It is only a matter of time before he reaches the high-level Emperor realm. When the handsome young man appeared, there was an uproar. Many people looked at the young master of the Lan family, Lan Ka, with fear in their eyes. Long Qijin's beautiful eyes turned and fell on Lan Ka. There was a trace of coldness in her eyes as she said, "Lan Ka, don't talk nonsense. I am not your dream lover." Lan Ka smiled. He was very thick-skinned. He quickly came forward and said to Long Qijin, "Actually, I also admire Senior Longwen. 1,000 years ago, there were very few Emperor Realm experts in the 7 great prefectures. If he had not unified the 7 great prefectures and shared the great demon sect's cultivation techniques and resources, the Pang Great World would not have developed so quickly. In fact, all of us are the beneficiaries of the Ryuka and Senior Longwen. Am I right?" Long Qijin raised her chin and snorted, "At least you have good taste." "Hee, that's natural. Qijin, I see that you've been talking for so long. You should be thirsty. Why don't we go to Xiang Ding restaurant for a drink and a meal?" Lan Ka asked. Long Qijin put her hands on her hips and said proudly. When she said that, Lan Ka's face turned bitter and he said, "Qijin, I have been chasing you for 2 years. Why are you not moved at all? Look at me. I am so handsome, my family is so rich, and my talent is so strong. Other girls will throw themselves at me. Why are you so cold-hearted? If you can defeat my father, I'll consider having a meal with you. Of course, if you can find Uncle Long Wen and defeat him, I'll consider dating you." Long Qijin's lips curled up slightly as she said, "If you can defeat my father, I'll consider having a meal with you." When she said that, Lan Ka smiled bitterly. Long Qijin's condition was too harsh. In the Black Dragon City, who didn't know that Long Qijin's father, Long Tian, was the strongest person in the Ryuka? His cultivation was at the 9th-level Emperor realm. Even the strongest person in the Lan family was not Long Tian's opponent. As for the second condition, it was even worse. Long Wen had disappeared for almost 1,000 years. How was he going to find him? And from all the rumors, even if Long Wen's strength was not as strong as Long Tian's, he was at least a high-level Emperor Realm expert. He was not someone Lan Ka could deal with. It could be said that it was impossible for him to fulfill any of the 2 conditions that Long Qijin had set. So, "Eating with you, Qijin, is really as difficult as ascending to heaven," Lan Ka said dejectedly. Chapter 1419. Protector Long Qijin's mischievous and sly expression, coupled with her elegant and pretty face, made her look rather adorable. This charm firmly attracted the gazes of many cultivators below. Zhuan could even faintly hear the sound of someone swallowing. This made Zhuan somewhat speechless. Rumble. Suddenly, a muffled sound of thunder came from the horizon. Then, a few hundred miles away from Black Dragon City, a thick black cloud began to spread. Countless bolts of lightning gathered within the black cloud. Blue light was faintly discernible within the black cloud, as if countless electric snakes were entwining around it. There seems to be someone in the black cloud? Suddenly, many people in Black Dragon City raised their heads to look at the sky. A few sharp-eyed people discovered that there seemed to be figures moving within the black cloud. After being reminded, many warriors focused their gazes and stared at the dark clouds. Sure enough, they found 2 figures there. Moreover, there were 2 figures. These 2 figures were constantly fighting under the black cloud. shrouded in countless bolts of lightning, they looked like gods. Rumble. Within the black cloud, a blue bolt of lightning as thick as a water bucket suddenly condensed together. Then it struck down from the sky. The blue light finally illuminated the two figures extremely clearly. These two figures continued to fight under the black cloud. The terrifying sound of collision was like thunder, constantly exploding in the sky above Black Dragon City. Under the light of the lightning, everyone finally saw the true appearance of the two figures that were constantly intertwining with each other. Both of them were men. One of the men had a high jaw, sharp eyes, an eagle-like nose, and a few strands of gray hair that resembled a goat's. He wore a long gray robe and his entire body exuded a gloomy aura. The other man was relatively young, at most around 28 or 29 years old. He had a tall figure and a resolute face. He wore black clothes and had long hair that draped over his shoulders. His hair fluttered in the howling wind, and his imposing manner was like a rainbow. If one were to take a closer look, they would notice that this young man was wearing clothes that were similar to Long Qijin's. "Father!" Long Qijin could not help but exclaim. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a touch of excitement. "It's Ryuka's #1 expert, Long Tian. And that old man is the protector. It seems that Long Tian is challenging the protector again. I wonder what the result will be this time?" Many of the surrounding martial artists had looks of astonishment in their eyes as they raised their heads and stared at the terrifying battle in the sky. "That Long Tian is indeed Zhuo Tian." Yuan, who was mixed in the crowd, naturally looked at the battle in the sky as he muttered in a low voice. Previously, when others mentioned that the #1 expert of Ryuka was called Long Tian, Yuan suspected that Long Tian was Zhuo Tian from the Zhuo family. Back then, Zhuo Tian was the #1 expert in the Zhuo family, but Zhuowen's name had overshadowed him. Moreover, after Zhuo Tian, Zhuo Xiang, and Zhuo Meishue entered the Azure Dragon Palace and received the nourishment of the Azure Dragon's origin, they awakened their own dragon souls. Among the descendants of the Long family, their talents could be considered as outstanding. As Long Tian and the Protector battled, a number of figures rushed out from the huge black dragon building behind the stone statue. The one leading them was Zhuo Xiangding, Zhuowen's grandfather. Although Zhuo Xiangding's hair was silver, his face was rosy and full of energy. The aura on his body was also much more vast than before. He had reached the Emperor realm. It seems that grandfather has also raised his cultivation to the Emperor realm in the past 1,000 years. Looking at the energetic Zhuo Xiangding, a smile appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. Although he could see that Zhuo Xiangding's aura was only at the first-level Emperor realm, and his aura was not particularly stable, it was obvious that he had used medicine to forcibly raise his cultivation. However, to be able to step into the Emperor realm, Zhuo Xiangding's lifespan had increased by at least 10 times. For Zhun, this was a good thing. After all, as his cultivation continued to increase, his lifespan would inevitably become longer and longer. When the time came for him to pursue the peak of the martial Tao, it would be an extremely painful thing for him to lose his family by his side. Therefore, Yuan had planned to wait for his strength to increase before forcefully raising Zhuo Xiangding's cultivation to the Emperor realm. However, it seemed that someone had already done it for him. Besides Zhuo Xiangding, there were familiar faces. First Uncle Zhuo Baiyin, second Uncle Zhuo Dingtian, Zhuo Xiang, Zhuo Meishue, Elder Xuan, and Miao Lu. Long Xiaotian, who was standing beside Zhuowen, trembled all over. His gaze was fixed on Zhuo Xiangding's figure at the top of the Black Dragon building. His eyes were filled with complex emotions and excitement. "Thank you. If it weren't for you, Ryuka would not have developed to this extent. Speaking of which, you are really much stronger than your father. You are the one who has supported the entire Ryuka." Long Xiaoyan's gaze fell on Zhuowen as he sighed softly. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "Father, you are too distant. Back then you had no choice. If you were in the Zhuo family, I'm afraid you would have done better than me." Just as Long Xiaotian was about to speak, a terrifying sound of thunder resounded over the entire Black Dragon City, drowning out all other sounds in the city. The battle between Long Xiaotian and the Guardian had moved from hundreds of miles away to the sky above the Black Dragon City. The battle between the two was extremely terrifying. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The space collapsed. Huge stars condensed from the star power constantly flashed and swept out. It was extremely terrifying. I wonder if Tian can defeat the Guardian this time? Zhuo Xiangding said with an extremely serious expression. Long Xiaotian's combat strength is very strong and he is very close to becoming a sage to be. If it wasn't for the fact that there is no power of law in this world, Long Xiaolun would have entered the invincible emperor realm or even become a sage to be. Elder Shiwan said. Zhuo Xiangding was a little worried and said, although Tian's combat strength is terrifying, the Guardian is after all an invincible emperor lord who has mastered the law of lightning. The outcome of the battle between Tian and the Guardian is uncertain. That's not necessarily true. After all, Long Xiaoyan has a dragon soul. Even if the dragon soul's grade is not high, it should be more than enough to go against the Guardian's law of lightning. Elder Shiwan shook his head. Great-grandfather. A clear voice rang out. Soon after, Long Qijin, who had been below the stone statue, had unknowingly arrived at Zhuo Xiangding's side. Her hands very naturally wrapped around Zhuo Xiangding's shoulders. Qijin, you want to tell stories under your Uncle Long Wen's stone statue again? Zhuo Xiangding touched Long Qijin's hair lovingly and said with a smile. Long Qijin stuck out her tongue and said playfully, didn't I always hear you say how powerful Uncle Long Wen is? My ears are getting calluses from hearing it. Of course, I have to vent a little. However, this Guardian is an invincible Emperor Realm expert. I wonder if Uncle Long Wen would be a match for the Guardian if he was still here? Long Qijin suddenly asked curiously. I think it shouldn't be a problem. Moreover, there is a high chance that he would defeat the Guardian. Zhuo Xiangding said with a smile. Long Qijin was slightly moved. She knew very well how strong the Guardian was. Even her father, Long Tian, did not dare to guarantee that he would be able to defeat the Guardian. However, in Zhuo Xiangding's eyes, Long Wen, who had been missing for almost 1,000 years, could actually defeat the Guardian. Wasn't Zhuo Xiangding a little too trusting of Long Wen? Although Long Wen had helped Ryuka a lot in the past, and Long Qijin had also admired this uncle that she had never met before, 1,000 years had passed, and everything had changed. Her father had already cultivated to the limits of this world. Even so, he was still unable to defeat the Guardian. However, Zhuo Xiangding still thought that Long Wen could defeat the Guardian. This was already a very high evaluation. I wonder if father can defeat the Guardian this time. Once he does, father will become a hero of Ryuka. Long Qijin muttered with a hint of worry in her beautiful eyes. Boom! Under the dark clouds, two figures clashed fiercely, and then they both retreated. The Guardian retreated a few steps, while Long Tian retreated a dozen steps. Long Tian, you've improved a lot. In just 10 years, you've reached the peak of the level 8 Emperor realm. However, I can tell you clearly that you won't be able to defeat me. The Guardian floated in the void, his sleeves fluttering in the wind as he stared coldly at Long Tian. That's not necessarily true. Let's end this quickly. You can use your law of lightning directly. Long Tian snorted coldly as he pointed his sword finger at his forehead. A blue light shot out from Long Tian's forehead and turned into a huge blue dragon that was almost 1,000 feet long. This dragon's appearance was somewhat similar to that of the Western dragons. It had 4 pairs of blue wings on its back, and a pair of dragon legs that were as thick as the trunk of a tree. Grade 3 Dragon Soul, Blue Mulberry Dragon. Long Tian jumped up and stood on the dragon's back, staring coldly at the Guardian. Since you insist on fighting, don't blame me for not being courteous. The Guardian sneered and clenched his right hand. Suddenly, countless thunderbolts filled the air and surrounded his body. Then, in his right palm, a sharp thunder blade appeared. The blade's surface was filled with countless strands of electricity. The Guardian waved his right hand and the thunder blade slashed out. Countless thunderbolts began to gather and formed a huge thunder blade shadow. It spanned across the sky and slashed down at Long Tian. Long Tian was not afraid at all. He took out a pitch-black spear from his spiritual ring with his right hand. With a twist of his right hand, he threw the spear towards the lightning blade shadow in the sky. At the same time, the blue mulberry dragon he was sitting on roared at the sky and spat out blue flames. The blue flames surrounded the surface of the black spear. The scorching heat spread, causing the power of Long Tion's spear to reach an extremely terrifying level. Rumble! The thunder blade shadow and the blue fire spear collided. Blue flames and thunderbolts exploded. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying air wave erupted between the two. In the center of the air wave, an area of vacuum was formed. What a terrifying attack! Seeing this scene, the cultivators in Black Dragon City who were watching the battle all gasped. The might of the battle between a ninth-layer martial emperor with a dragon soul and an invincible sovereign lord who had grasped the laws was something they could only look up to. It was something they could not hope to achieve. Puff! Chapter 1420. Long Tian has been defeated. Someone has been defeated. Who could it be? Everyone's attention landed on the figure that was flying backwards. When they saw the true appearance of the figure, waves of sighs sounded from the crowd. The reason was that the person who had been sent flying was Long Tian. At this moment, Long Tian was in a sorry state. His black clothes were torn in many places and his wounds were charred. It was as if he had been roasted by fire. There was a shocking trace of blood at the corner of his mouth and he looked extremely terrifying. "Father!" Long Qijin exclaimed. Her beautiful eyes were filled with worry as her slender hands gripped the corner of Zhuo Xiangding's clothes tightly. The guardian who has comprehended the Saint Rune law is too powerful. Even a dragon soul martial artist is no match for the invincible Emperor Lord. Zhuo Xiangding sighed. Elder Xiwan and the rest of the people who were standing behind Zhuo Xiangding fell silent. Long Tian was currently the most powerful person in Ryuka. His 9th-level Emperor realm cultivation coupled with his dragon soul made him much stronger than an ordinary 9th-level Emperor. Even Long Tian was no match for the protectors. It was likely that there would not be a second person in the Long family who could defeat the protectors and successfully ascend to the upper realm. Perhaps only Zhuon can defeat the guardian. Elder Xiwan suddenly sighed. As soon as he said this, the rest of the Ryuka upper echelons started to think of the powerful figure who had led Ryuka to rise in panicked Great World. He had also unified the 7 great prefectures and was a monster who had achieved countless feats. As Elder Xiwan had said, perhaps if Zhuon was really here, he might be able to defeat the guardian and ascend to the upper world. However, such thoughts were useless as Zhuon had already left Azure Dragon Hall. No one knew when he would return to this world and lead Ryuka to the upper world. Long Tian, your strength is not bad. However, it is wishful thinking to think that you can defeat me. In other words, you no longer have the chance to defeat me in this world. Do not challenge me in the future as there is no need to do so. The guardian hovered in the air as he looked down at Long Tian, who was flying backwards. His indifferent voice rang in Long Tian's ears. The Lan Sang dragon roared. Like a bolt of lightning, it swept behind Long Tian and caught him on its back. Long Tian held the spear in his right hand as he knelt on the dragon's back in a sorry state. His eyes were filled with reluctance. Let's go. After the guardian finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and turned around, intending to leave. However, just as he turned around, a sharp sound broke through the air. Like the pressure of the deep sea, it swept towards him from behind. A sharp, ear-piercing sound rang in his ears. The guardian's pupils shrank. He stepped to the side with his right foot and clenched his right hand. The terrifying law of lightning gathered in his palm and blasted it towards the sound behind him. Rumble! Countless bolts of lightning exploded in the guardian's palm. Then, a black shadow slammed into his palm. The guardian's eyes narrowed and he took a few steps back. After he stabilized himself, he noticed that the black shadow was a pitch-black spear, and it was Long Tian's weapon. Boom! The guardian sent the spear flying with a palm. He stared coldly at Long Tian and said, "Are you provoking me?" Long Tian waved his right hand and caught the spear that had been sent flying. He coughed and laughed. "Our battle is not over yet." Why are you leaving so quickly? You're very courageous, but you've completely angered me. If you want to fight, I'll accompany you. As he spoke, the guardian's long hair fluttered in the wind. A huge bolt of lightning descended from the sky and landed in front of the guardian, turning into a lightning sword. Densely packed electric arcs spread out, enveloping the protector's entire body, making him look like a mighty and extraordinary thunder god. Lightning sword. The guardian stepped out of the void. Countless bolts of lightning gathered under his feet. Then, his entire body turned into lightning. His speed reached the extreme. He arrived in front of Long Tian in an instant and slashed out with the lightning sword in his hand. Rumble. Thunder rumbled as the sword slashed out. Countless bolts of lightning descended from the sky. Feeling the terror of the sword, Long Tian's expression changed drastically. He swung the spear in his hand and the tip of the spear exploded with blue flames. Ding! The sound of metal clashing resounded. Then, Long Tian's expression changed drastically. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. His face was as pale as snow. The guardian did not show any mercy. As Long Tian flew backwards, he slashed out once again. Countless bolts of lightning gathered and turned into a lightning sword that was hundreds of feet long. It slashed down on Long Tian. Ooh! The Lan Sang dragon roared and spread its wings. It instantly blocked in front of Long Tian. It opened its mouth and spewed out billowing blue flames. Boom! However, under the might of the lightning sword, the blue flames that the Lan Sang dragon spewed out were immediately annihilated. The Lan Sang dragon was slashed into a ray of light and sank into Long Tian's forehead. I've said it before. If you anger me, the consequences will be dire. The guardian leaped into the air above Long Tian. He stretched out his right hand and countless bolts of lightning gathered to form a giant hand. He grabbed Long Tian and looked down at Long Tian with a trace of killing intent in his eyes. Not good. The Lord Protector is going to kill Long Tian. Zhuo Xiangding's expression changed drastically as he rushed out. Behind him, Elder Xuan, Zhuo Xiang, Zhuo Dingtian, Zhuo Baidian, and the other core Ryuka people followed closely behind. They all rushed towards the guardian. Father! Long Kizan shouted as she followed closely behind him. Her watery eyes were already misty. She did not expect things to develop to this point. In the past, when Long Tian challenged the guardian would not kill him. He would only injure Long Tian and leave. But today, the protector actually had killing intent and wanted to kill Long Tian. Thinking that Long Tian would die, Long Qichin's heart was filled with fear and dread. Father, nothing must happen to you. Long Qichin's lips trembled as she muttered to herself. The other martial artists in the Black Dragon City were also stunned. Obviously, they did not expect the guardian to be so cold and ruthless. He wanted to kill Long Tian. The guardian looked indifferently at Zhuo Xiangding and the others. He slashed down with the lightning sword in his hand. A crescent-shaped lightning sword fell and blasted towards Zhuo Xiangding and the others. Block it! Elder Xuan took a step forward and blocked in front of him. Waves of mental energy gushed out, while the others behind him launched their own attacks. Boom! The sword light fell and the attacks of Elder Xuan and the others collapsed. Everyone groaned and retreated a few hundred steps. Long Tian, I did not want to kill you. But I am not in a good mood today and you have angered me. So, I need to vent my anger. You can die now. After the guardian finished speaking, the tip of the lightning sword pierced towards Long Tian's forehead. Swoosh! The moment the tip of the sword was about to pierce Long Tian's forehead, a piercing sound rang out. Amidst the piercing sound, there was the faint sound of a tiger's roar. The protector's eyes narrowed. Soon after, he saw a ferocious tiger that was dozens of feet large leaping up from below and arriving in front of him in an instant. Slash! The guardian snorted coldly. The lightning sword's momentum changed as it slashed forward. Lightning filled the air and blasted onto the ferocious tiger. Soon after, the sound of metal clashing rang out. Only then did the guardian realize that the ferocious tiger was merely an illusion. It contained a long spear that was about 10 feet long. A powerful force was transmitted from the long spear. Then, the guardian could not help but retreat. Long Tian used this opportunity to break free from the guardian's restraint and quickly retreated to the top of the Black Dragon Tower where Zhuxiangding was. Are you okay? Zhuxiangding and the others immediately went up and asked with concern. Father! Long Qijin rushed up and threw herself into Long Tian's arms. She secretly sobbed and said, "You scared me to death. If you died, what would I do? Mother left so early. You are my only family. You can't leave before me." Hearing the girl's silent reprimand, Long Tian sighed and said, "Qijin, father was too impulsive. Father will not take such a risk again." After a few more words, Long Tian finally managed to coax Long Qijin. Then, his gaze fell on the crowd below and he said loudly, "Many thanks to Benefactor for saving my life. Long Tian is eternally grateful." Others might not have seen that attack clearly, but Long Tian had seen it clearly. It had come from the crowd, but the owner of the spear had concealed himself very well. He was unable to pinpoint the exact location. Long Qijin's beautiful eyes also looked curiously at the crowd below, looking for the person who had helped her father. To be able to repel the guardian, this person was definitely an expert. Moreover, he was likely an extremely strong expert. The guardian's face was ugly as he said coldly, "What do you mean by sneaking around? Come out and fight if you have the guts." As soon as the guardian said this, the crowd fell into silence. Then an erratic voice sounded, "Are you sure you want to fight?" The voice was so ethereal that no one could tell where the source of the voice was. The guardian narrowed his eyes, revealing a trace of caution. Even he could not find the exact location of the voice. It was clear that the owner of the voice was not simple. However, he was after all the guardian of the panicked great world. How could he not dare to accept the challenge? Otherwise, he would lose a lot of face. "Fight. Why don't you fight?" the guardian said coldly. As soon as the guardian finished speaking, a slender figure suddenly swept out from a corner of the crowd. Like a great rock spreading its wings, he instantly flew towards the guardian. "An 8th layer Emperor Realm expert dares to play tricks on me? Go to hell." The guardian's eyes immediately became disdainful when the figure appeared. This was because the aura of the figure was only at the 8th layer Emperor Realm. How could such a person fight with him? The lightning sword light fell once again. Its aura was like a rainbow as it quickly engulfed the figure. "It's over. An 8th layer Emperor Realm expert fighting against a guardian. Isn't he courting death? Is there something wrong with his head?" Seeing this scene, many people in the Black Dragon City were in an uproar. They all thought that there was something wrong with this person's head. Even Zhuxiangding and the others frowned. "You overestimate yourself." The guardian kept his lightning sword and said coldly, "Are you talking about yourself?" Chapter 1421. The spear was so powerful that it landed on the guardian's chest with a crisp sound of bones breaking. The guardian spat out a mouthful of blood and fell from the sky, crashing heavily onto the ground. Boom! A huge crater appeared on a street in Black Dragon City. Dust filled the air, and the surrounding martial artists quickly retreated, their eyes glazed over. Just now, they did not even see what had happened. The guardian, who had been so powerful, had been blasted from the sky in a sorry state. This sudden turn of events left many people dumbfounded. The faces of the Ryuka higher-ups, who had been watching the battle, froze. The guardian that Long Tian could not defeat had been defeated by this person in an instant. The most shocked person was Long Tian. His face was stiff, and the corners of his mouth curled up in bitterness. "So powerful! Who is this person?" Standing beside Long Tian, Long Qijin's beautiful eyes flickered as she stared at the young man floating in the air. She did not know why, but she felt a sense of familiarity from this young man. His facial features were also familiar, but she could not recall where she had seen him before. However, when the Ryuka higher-ups looked at the young man, their expressions were surprisingly the same. They were shocked, surprised, and excited. "It's him, he's back." Long Tian's body trembled as he looked at the young man with a complicated expression. There was a trace of excitement in his voice. Long Qijin naturally saw the expressions on Long Tian and the other Ryuka higher-ups' faces. Her beautiful eyes were filled with confusion. It seemed that all the Ryuka people knew this young man. Then who was he? Boom. The guardian slowly got up and stared at the young man with a gloomy expression. He asked with some fear, "Who are you?" The guardian asked the question that was on the minds of many martial artists in Black Dragon City. Who was this terrifying young man who had suddenly appeared in front of them? "I am a Ryuka. Many people call me Longwen," Zhuowen said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, the entire Black Dragon City fell silent. Everyone's eyes were wide open. After the silence, there was an uproar. Longwen, who had disappeared for almost 1,000 years, had reappeared today. Moreover, the strength he had displayed was so powerful that the guardian, who had mastered the law of thunder, was defeated in one move. How powerful did he have to be to do that? So he is Uncle Longwen. No wonder he looks so familiar. He does look like the stone statue. His face is Longwen, and Long Qijin of time. Long Qizin's beautiful eyes were filled with curiosity as she stared fixedly at the young man standing in the void, her delicate face flushed with excitement. Seeing her idol for the first time, Long Qijin couldn't help but be excited. Even now, she couldn't wait to rush forward, wanting to get closer to this uncle that she had never met but had left behind many legends. Long. 1,000 years ago, that Longwen who unified the 7 major prefectures and obtained all the resources of the great demon sect ruins? The guardian narrowed his eyes and asked in surprise. "That's right." Zhuan nodded and continued, "I heard that you are the guardian of the upper world. If I defeat you, will I be qualified to enter the upper world? Even so, do you think that you have the strength to defeat me just because you hit me once?" The guardian's eyes were gloomy. He came from the upper world and was the only expert in the second heaven who had mastered the law of thunder. He was above all the living beings in the second heaven. Longwen, who was in front of him, was only an 8th-level emperor. Therefore, he did not think that Longwen had the strength to defeat him. As for the previous incident, he attributed it to an accident and his own carelessness. Boom! The terrifying law of thunder emanated from the protector's body. The protector stretched out its right hand, and countless dark clouds gathered. Bolts of lightning as thick as a child's arm began to spread out from the dark clouds. With a rumble, they gathered together to form a huge qilin. "Lightning qilin!" The guardian shouted coldly. This was his strongest move. Even an unrivaled emperor lord of the same level would die under the lightning qilin's attack. He did not believe that Zhuan, who was only an 8th-level emperor, could withstand this move. So strong. When the guardian fought with Long Tian, he did not use his full strength. This is his full strength. Many cultivators in the Black Dragon City looked up at the huge lightning qilin with their mouths agape. The lightning qilin's aura was extremely terrifying. Long Tian's face was ugly. After seeing the guardian use the lightning qilin, how could he not know that the guardian had not used his full strength in the previous battle? "Uncle Longwen, can you withstand this move?" Long Qizin's jade-like hands clutched Long Tian's sleeves tightly. Her face was pale and her eyes were filled with nervousness. He should be able to. Although Longwen's cultivation is only at the 8th-level emperor realm, his dragon soul is of a high grade. If he releases his dragon soul, he should be able to withstand this attack. Long Tian said in a deep voice. Long Qizin's heart calmed down slightly when she heard this. However, she could not help but worry for Zhun. Not only Long Qizin, but Zhuo Xiangding, Elder Shun, Miao LV and the rest of the Ryuka upper echelons who were familiar with Zhuan felt their hearts tighten at this moment. In the sky, the lightning qilin was formed by the law of lightning. Even though it was far away, the power that it transmitted was extremely terrifying. It was as if it could devour everything in the world. Under everyone's gaze, the lightning qilin was extremely fast. In an instant, it was in front of Zhuan. On the other hand, Zhuan stood quietly in the sky. There was no emotion on his face. "Die!" The guardian shouted. The lightning qilin roared and its right claw, which was the size of a small mountain, tore through the sky. It brought along countless lightning bolts and slashed down on Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen raised his head slightly and stretched out his right hand. His right eye started to turn icy blue. In an instant, a large ice wall formed in front of his right hand. On the surface of the ice wall, the law of ice intertwined and formed a strange pattern. Boom! The lightning Qilin's right claw slammed down and landed on the ice wall. Then, there was a terrifying explosion and the attack was blocked by the ice wall. At the same time, Yun took a step forward and disappeared from where he was. He appeared on the back of the lightning Qilin and punched out with his right hand. Terrifying law of ice condensed in his palm. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The moment his right palm landed on the surface of the lightning Qilin, a freezing force surged out. Then, everyone was shocked to see that the terrifying lightning Qilin had turned into an ice sculpture under the freezing force. Break! Zhuowen indifferently spat out these words. The frozen thunder Kirin completely shattered. It was broken so easily? This scene stunned countless warriors in the Black Dragon City. The Thunder Kylin, which had been terrifying just a moment ago, had turned into an ice sculpture and was shattered into countless ice shards by Zhuowen's attack. What? The Guardian's eyes widened and he exclaimed in disbelief. However, his exclamation did not last long. Zhuowen escaped into the void like a ghost and appeared behind the Guardian in the next second. Then he placed his right hand on the Guardian's shoulder. Suddenly, the Guardian was frozen in place. His entire body was confined by the law of ice and he could not move. Do you still want to fight? Zhuowen slowly walked in front of the Protector, and the corners of his mouth curled up as he smiled at the Protector. The Guardian's face was stiff and he could not move. The confinement force formed by the law of ice surrounded the Guardian and he did not dare to move at will. No need. You win. The Guardian licked his lips and said bitterly. As soon as the Guardian said this, there was an uproar in the surrounding Black Dragon City. The Guardian was the strongest person in the second heaven. For thousands of years, he had been guarding this heaven and earth, or rather, guarding the passage to the upper world. In this heaven and earth, no one had ever defeated the Guardian. In other words, many people subconsciously did not think that anyone could defeat the Guardian and enter the upper world. But now, Zhuowen's arrival had completely broken this stalemate. In fact, the Guardian was defeated in a few moves by Jun. He won. Zhuo Xiangding, Elder Xiuan, and the other senior Ryuka officials relaxed and smiled. At the same time, they were shocked. Although they knew very well that Zhuowen's strength was definitely not weak, they did not expect him to be strong to such an extent. The Protector being defeated so easily was something they had not expected. Uncle Long Wen is so strong. Long Qiqing clenched her fists and her delicate face was flushed. Her beautiful eyes were filled with excitement. Long Wen, you have defeated me. Can you let me go now? The Guardian frowned slightly and said with some fear. It is said that after defeating you, I have the right to go to the upper world. You should tell me the way to go to the upper world and I will let you go. Zhuowen said indifferently. The Guardian narrowed his eyes and said, according to the rules, you do have the right to go to the upper world. However, I need to preside over the passage to the upper world. You have to come with me to the place where I am. There is a passage to the upper world there. I see. Zhuowen nodded and released the Guardian's shackles. After all, the Guardian controlled the passage to the upper world. Zhuowen did not want to offend him. The Guardian stared at Zhuowen with a complicated look. Then, he waved his sleeve and a light seal shot into Zhuowen's palm. He continued, this contains the coordinates of the passage to the upper world. You just have to go to the place where the coordinates are. When you get there, I will sense it and come out to greet you. After saying this, the Guardian was surrounded by lightning. He turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared. After the Guardian left, Zhuo Xiangding, Elder Xiuan, Miao LV, and the other senior Ryuka officials rushed to Zhuowen's side. Their eyes were filled with excitement. Chapter 1422. Greetings, Zhuowen. Elder Xiuan, Zhuo Baiyin, Zhuo Dingtian, Yue Xiang, and Zhuo Meishue all came forward to greet Zhuowen. Their faces were filled with excitement. Juan had long become the pillar of the Zhou family. Now that the Zhou family had changed to Ryuka, Zhuan's position in the family was still firm and unshakable. Miao LV stood at the back. After everyone had greeted her, she slowly walked forward. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on Zhuan, and there was a trace of mist in her watery eyes. "Big brother Zhuan, you're finally here." Miao LV smiled brightly, but there were 2 lines of tears in her eyes. She looked so pitiful. Zhuan sighed softly and wiped the 2 lines of tears on Miao LV's face with his right hand. "Yes, I'm here. I've made you worry." "Are you really Longwen? The Longwen who unified the 7 prefectures 1,000 years ago?" Suddenly, a crisp voice sounded from behind Zhuan. Soon after, Long Qijin had appeared beside Zhuan and said with a smile. Long Tian followed behind Long Qijin with a smile. Perhaps because she saw Zhuan's gaze, Long Qijin nodded at him. Although she did not say anything, Zhuan could still feel a trace of gratitude in Long Tian's eyes. Zhuan nodded at Long Tian, then patted Long Qijin's head and smiled. "My name is Zhuan, but in Ryuka, I'm also called Longwen. I'm your real uncle." Long Qijin, who was originally a little nervous, found that Zhuan was not as serious as she had imagined. After smiling, she let out a sigh of relief and revealed an extremely bright smile. She said sweetly, "Uncle Longwen. Hee, when you were born, I, as your uncle, wasn't around. I'm sorry. Take this as a gift for our first meeting." As he spoke, Zhuan took out a soft whip that was overflowing with silver light from his spirit ring. The surface of this soft whip exuded an extremely powerful pressure. Everyone was familiar with this pressure as it was the unique emperor's aura of an emperor weapon. Judging from this pressure, this soft whip was definitely not a simple emperor weapon. Mid-grade monarch artifact? Longwen, this is too precious. Qi Jin has not even reached martial emperor yet, and you're giving her a mid-tier emperor artifact. That's like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Long Tian's pupils shrank as he hurriedly refused. Even the Ryuka did not have many mid-tier monarch weapons. Although Long Qijin was Long Tian's daughter, she did not have a single monarch weapon on her. He planned to wait until Long Qijin reached martial emperor before giving her an emperor weapon. Moreover, it would only be a low-grade emperor weapon. A mid-grade emperor weapon was too precious. This is a low-grade immortal pill, Extreme Yin Pure Yang pill. After consuming this immortal pill, Qi Jin should be able to smoothly break through to martial emperor realm within a month. At that time, she will be able to use this emperor weapon. Zhuan flicked his finger and took out a pill that was rich in medicinal energy. He handed it over to Long Qijin. The surging medicinal energy caused many people to be moved. "What? Immortal pill?" Long Tian's face twitched as he muttered in a low voice. He had naturally heard of immortal pills. This thing was of a higher grade than spiritual herbs. Its medicinal energy was extremely powerful. However, ordinary people would not be able to refine it. Only those who had mastered immortal energy were qualified to refine immortal pills. It could be said that immortal pills were something that ordinary cultivators could only dream of. However, Yuan had casually taken out an immortal pill and handed it to Long Qijin. From this, one could see how strong his confidence was. Long Qijin's beautiful eyes were almost curved into crescents. She excitedly kept the Extreme Yin Pure Yang pill and the silver whip. Then she smiled sweetly at Zhuan and said, "Uncle Longwen is so nice." The rest of the people in the surroundings were envious. Zhuan could casually take out a mid-grade emperor weapon and an immortal pill, which were extremely precious in the eyes of ordinary people. It could be seen that his wealth was extremely rich. However, no one thought of snatching things from Zhuan, because that would be courting death. After all, Zhuan's strength was there for all to see. After doing all this, Zhuan suddenly looked at Zhuxiangding and said with a mysterious smile, "Grandfather, this time I have brought along an important person. For you, it is definitely someone you will not expect." Zhuxiangding was stunned. Then he smiled and said, "Kid, you have made it so mysterious. It must be an extremely important person. Who is it?" "Father." Just as Zhuxiangding finished speaking, a low voice came from the crowd. Then, a slender man slowly walked out from the crowd. Zhuo Xiangding's face stiffened. This voice was extremely familiar to him. Then, he turned his head stiffly. When his gaze fell on the figure, his body trembled. His throat was dry, and his wrinkled face was filled with excitement. Not only Zhuo Xiangding, but Zhuo Baiyin and Zhuo Dingtian were also shocked. Then they were pleasantly surprised. The strange expressions on the three's faces naturally attracted the attention of the other Ryuka people. They were all puzzled. Obviously, they were not familiar with the man who had walked out from the crowd. He is Zhuo Xiang, Zhuo Meishue, and the others asked curiously. Zhuo Xiaotian, also known as Long Xiaotian. He was once the #1 genius of the Zhuo family. He is also my father, Zhuo Xiangding explained with a smile. As soon as this was said, some of the Ryuka people who knew about the past were in an uproar. Long Xiaotian was emotional. He came to Zhuo Xiangding and knelt on the ground. He said with guilt, "Father, your son is unfilial. I have not returned to the Zhuo family for more than 20 years. Zhuo Xiangding shook his head and hurriedly helped Long Xiaotian up. He said, "This is not your fault. Zhuowen has already told me about the Qing Xian Empire. You had no choice." Zhuo Dingtian and Zhuo Baidian also came forward and sighed. "Third brother, what happened back then is not your fault. You can only blame the Qing Emperor for being too hateful. Yes, Xiaotian, we are already very happy that you were able to come out and meet us." Zhuo Xiangding patted Zhuo Xiaotian's shoulders heavily. There was no reproach in his eyes. Instead, it was full of love and affection. Back then, when he learned that Zhuo Xiaotian had been imprisoned by the Qing Emperor on the 18th floor of the Imperial City dungeon, who knew how tormented he had been? After all, Zhuo Xiaotian was the disciple that he had poured the most effort into in the Zhuo family. He was also the son that he had the closest relationship with. In the future, I will leave the glorious Ryuka matters to you and Zhu. I know that with your and Zhuowen's talent, your achievements will be extremely terrifying. Ryuka will once again become the #1 power in the Eastern land, Zhuo Xiangding said with a smile. Grandfather, I forgot to mention that father has already become a saint, Zhuon suddenly said. Silence. In an instant, the surroundings became extremely quiet. Everyone's eyes fell on Long Xiaoan, and they were all filled with shock. In the panicked great world, whether it was the Ryuka or other warriors, they had never seen a saint. The strongest person they had seen was the guardian of heaven and earth, who was at the invincible emperor realm. Now, a saint who was far more powerful than the guardian had appeared in front of them. Everyone was extremely shocked. A saint? Zhuo Xiangding, Zhuo Dingtian, and Zhuo Baidian's faces froze. Immediately, they were pleasantly surprised. Although they all knew that Long Xiaotian was extraordinarily talented, they did not expect him to become a saint so quickly. This is not the place to talk. Let's go into the Black Dragon Tower first. Perhaps Zhuo Xiangding had sensed the uproar in the crowd, so he whispered to the crowd and led them into the Black Dragon restaurant. After the Ryuka's group left, the discussion in the Black Dragon City did not die down. Instead, it became even more intense. Almost all of the topics revolved around Long Xiaotian, the saint. The Ryuka is getting more and more terrifying. Not only did Ryuan, who had disappeared for thousands of years, appear again and defeat the guardian, but now there is a saint named Long Xiaoan. Not far from the stone statue, Lan Ka looked at the Ryuka's group with fear. In his heart, he was thinking about how the Lan family could build a good relationship with the Ryuka. The Lan family's wealth was comparable to that of a country, and they even controlled most of the wealth in the panicked great world. However, in the face of absolute power, they were like ants. Perhaps in the past, the Lan family was qualified to compete with the Ryuka. However, with the addition of Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian, the Lan family was no longer qualified to challenge the Ryuka. If the Lan family did not want to be destroyed, they could only think about how to build a good relationship with the Ryuka. In the spacious hall, there were many armchairs. Zhuo Xiangding was followed by Zhuowen, Long Xiaotian, and the others. After entering the hall, they sat down casually. Xiaoan, you have really become a saint. If this is true, the Ryuka has a chance to rise again. As soon as everyone sat down, Zhuo Xiangding looked at Long Xiaotian excitedly and asked. Not only Zhuo Xiangding, but everyone else in the hall also focused their attention on Long Xiaoyan. Of course, some people had a trace of doubt in their eyes. Long Xiaotian smiled and slowly rose to his feet. A faintly discernible saintly might burst out of his body. Boom! In an instant, the air in the hall froze. A pressure that was much more terrifying than the emperor's aura spread across everyone's body. Everyone was shocked and frightened. Even Long Xiaotian, whose cultivation was at the 9th level emperor realm, could not withstand the saint's aura. He could not stand up straight. Is this, the saint's aura, unique to saints? Long Xiaotian murmured with fear in his eyes. Everyone else's expression was similar. They had a lingering fear in their hearts. Long Xiaotian waved his sleeve, and the terrifying saint's aura that had spread out from his body was immediately retracted into his body. As soon as the saint's aura retreated, the originally tense atmosphere relaxed. Everyone who had been suppressed by the saint's aura also breathed a sigh of relief. Good. The Ryuka has a chance to rise again. Zhuo Xiangding was very excited and said the word, good, several times. Everyone else came back to their senses and looked happy. The stronger the Ryuka was, the happier they would be. After all, they had the support of the Ryuka. However, the one who has hindered the rise of the Ryuka is the Blue Dragon Hall. Back then, it was the Blue Dragon Hall who shamelessly attacked us from behind, which led to the destruction of the Ryuka. For the past 10,000 years, the descendants of the Ryuka could only hide. It was very frustrating. Zhuo Xiangding clenched his fists. When he thought of the Blue Dragon Hall, hatred flashed in his eyes. Whether it was the incident with Long Xiaotian or the past, the Blue Dragon Hall had long become the Ryuka's mortal enemy. If they did not destroy the Blue Dragon Hall, the Ryuka would not be able to gain a foothold in the east. Chapter 1423. Leave, the Blue Dragon Hall must be destroyed, but our Ryuka isn't strong enough yet. Jun narrowed his eyes as he thought of the Blue Dragon Hall. The Blue Dragon Hall's hall master, Sapphire Shore, had targeted him several times, and had long since aroused the killing intent in Jun. We're still not a match for the Blue Dragon Hall? We now have thousands of Emperor Realm experts in Ryuka. There are close to 100 high-level Emperor Realm experts, a few hundred mid-level Emperor Realm experts, and the rest are low-level Emperor Realm experts. As for the 4 Supremes, there are countless of them. Zhuo Xiangding said in disbelief. Von was stunned. He didn't expect Ryuka to have so many Emperor Realm experts. However, he still shook his head and said, it's not about the number of Emperor Realm experts. It's just that the Blue Dragon Hall has more top experts than Ryuka. Long Xiaotian nodded and said, the Blue Dragon Hall's hall master is Sapphire Shore. He's already a sky saint, and his cultivation is much higher than mine. We're currently no match for the Blue Dragon Hall. Furthermore, Sapphire Shore isn't the only sage in the Blue Dragon Hall. Currently, I know of 3 sages, and perhaps there are still other sages in hiding. When Long Xiaotian said this, everyone in the hall fell silent. There was even a look of shock on their faces. There was no doubt that Long Xiaotian's words were extremely shocking to them. Sages were already legendary existences to them. They didn't expect the Blue Dragon Hall to have more than one sage. Moreover, the Blue Dragon Hall's hall master, Sapphire Shore, was someone that even Long Xiaotian felt inferior to. Looking at the expressions on everyone's faces, Jun could naturally guess what they were thinking. Clearly, they found it hard to imagine that the Blue Dragon Hall actually had so many saints. However, Zhuo Xiangding and the others couldn't be blamed. After all, they were from the Azure Mystic Empire and had never entered the 9th Netherworld realm before. They didn't know how powerful the forces in the 9th Netherworld realm were. Zhuan had never been to the Dragon Spectre realm before, but he was rather familiar with the Divine Spectre realm. In the Divine Spectre realm, just the Divine Spectre Academy alone had thousands of disciples, and the weakest amongst them was a martial emperor. This was not including the entire Divine Spectre realm. If the entire Divine Spectre realm was included, the number of martial emperors would probably reach tens of thousands. This was definitely a terrifying number. Furthermore, the Dragon Wasteland's power was even greater than the Divine Wastelands. Most likely, The number of Emperor Realm cultivators there was even greater than the Divine Wastelands. After thousands of years of development, the current Ryuka was indeed strong, and many times stronger than before. In the current Ryuka, any ordinary martial emperor could easily destroy the Azure Mystic Empire. However, there was still a gap between them and the 9th Netherworld Realm, not to mention the Dragon Spectre Realm, which was ranked first in the 9th Netherworld Realm. The current Ryuka wasn't strong enough. It seems like we were frogs in a well. We thought that Xiaotian had become a saint, and with the martial emperors in the Ryuka, we would be able to fight the Blue Dragon Hall. Zhuo Xiangding shook his head and said dejectedly. Zhuan smiled and said, "The third heaven and earth of the Azure Dragon Hall contains a strong time difference. We still have enough time." "Then it's useless. Didn't you notice that the second heaven and earth doesn't have any laws of heaven and earth? Tian is the most talented person in the Ryuka, but he has been stuck in the 9th level martial emperor realm for hundreds of years. If there were laws of heaven and earth, he could become an invincible martial emperor, or even a half-saint." Zhuo Xiangding sighed. "That's why I plan to bring the Ryuka to the upper realm. There might be laws of heaven and earth there." Zhuan stood up slowly and said proudly, "You plan to go to the upper realm? I heard from the Guardian that there are saints in the upper realm. Zhuan, are you sure you'll be fine?" Long Tian asked worriedly. Zhuan smiled and said, "How can I not try? Furthermore, I have to go to the upper realm because I need to be strong enough." At this point, Zhuan clenched his fists, and a cold and determined look appeared in his eyes. Whether it was taking revenge on the Blue Dragon Hall or going to the Burning Heaven sect to summon Mu Chenxue back, he needed to be strong. Zhuan urgently needed to be strong now. As long as he could pass through the third heaven of the Azure Dragon Hall, he would be qualified to refine the Azure Dragon Hall and completely control it. "When do you plan to go to the upper realm? When the time comes, you can bring me along." Long Xiaotian patted Zhuowen's shoulder and said, "After a period of time, I need to adjust my condition to the peak. Moreover, I plan to refine a batch of immortal pills for the Ryuka to reward the younger generation and promote the Ryuka to become stronger." Zhuowen said lightly. "Immortal pills?" When they heard about the immortal pills, many people in the hall had a glimmer of light in their eyes. Originally, when Zhuan generously took out the immortal pills to give to Long Qijin, everyone had already guessed it. Now that Zhuowen had admitted it personally, everyone was even more excited. An arcana master who had the ability to refine immortal pills would be of great help to the development of a force. "Elder Shi Yuan, I am afraid that I will need you to be my assistant in the process of refining the immortal pills." Zhuan suddenly smiled and said to Shi Yuan, who was not far away. Shi Yuan rubbed his hands and said with a grin, "It would be my pleasure. If there is anything that you need me for, just call me." Zhuan nodded and immediately flicked his finger. He handed a jade slip to Shi Yuan and said, "This jade slip records the raw materials for the immortal pills that I want to refine. I hope that Elder Shi Yuan and everyone can collect them as soon as possible." Shi Yuan nodded and looked at Zhuo Xiangding. He then hurriedly left the hall and prepared to list the materials and order people to collect them. 10 days passed. In a dark room, Zhuan sat cross-legged in front of a futon. In front of him, there were 2 spiritual rings. These 2 spiritual rings were given to him by Elder Shi Yuan. They were filled with the raw materials for the immortal pills that he wanted to refine. The immortal pill that Zhuan wanted to refine this time was called the 5 Zoisha 100 Flower Elixir. It was a low-grade immortal pill that was made by mixing 5 types of Ganoderma and 100 flowers. Speaking of which, the raw materials needed for the 5 Zoisha 100 Flower Elixir were not particularly rare. However, the raw materials were extremely troublesome. After all, it required 5 types of Ganoderma and 100 types of flowers. Moreover, they could not be the same. The conditions were quite harsh. However, the advantage was that the raw materials for this immortal pill were not like the Lunar Pure Yang Elixir and the 9-patterned Green Spirit Elixir. The main ingredients needed were very rare and could not be found easily. In addition, Ryuka was very powerful in the panicked big world. It was not difficult to find these raw materials. The raw materials in these 2 spiritual rings should be enough to refine nearly 1,005 Zoisha 100 flower elixirs. It should be enough to cultivate the Ryuka elite disciples. However, for the Ryuka as a whole, it is not enough. Zhuan's eyes flashed. He tapped his forehead with his right hand and immediately took out the Fushi cauldron. He said, "Cheng Huang, I'm counting on you this time." As he spoke, Yuan carefully selected the raw materials from the spiritual rings and threw them into the Fushi cauldron. At the same time, he used his immortal qi to control the fire in the Fushi cauldron. Time passed slowly. Zhuan stayed in the room for more than a month. Finally, the raw materials in the 2 spiritual rings were completely refined into the 5 Zoisha 100 flower elixir. After resting for a few days, Zhuan once again immersed himself in the process of refining the immortal pill. Elder Shiwan and Zhuo Xiangding continuously instructed the Ryuka people to search for the raw materials for the 5 Zoisha 100 flower elixir. Half a year passed. In the room where Zhuan was, a terrifying spiritual pressure exploded. Then, it formed a terrifying spiritual storm in the sky. That's someone's spiritual power has broken through. Not far away, Elder Shiwan raised his head and looked in that direction. He muttered, "That's where Zhuowen is. I'm afraid Zhuowen has broken through." What a terrifying guy. He was already at the minor heaven stage. Now that he has broken through, he's at the heaven stage. Elder Shiwan's mouth was full of bitterness. Back then, he was at the peak of the 6th stage Arcana Master. After staying in the Azure Dragon Hall for nearly 1,000 years, his spiritual power had naturally broken through. However, it was only at the minor heaven stage. However, Zhuowen, who was so much younger than him, had surpassed him in terms of mental energy attainments. This caused him to feel a little embarrassed. The door to the room opened and a young man in a black robe walked out slowly. He exuded a fierce aura. It was Zhuowen. It seems that the constant use of immortal energy to concoct immortal pills for the past 6 months has allowed my psychic power to make a breakthrough. Zhuowen clenched his fists with excitement in his eyes. The breakthrough in his mental energy was definitely a pleasant surprise for him. Sush, sush, sush. Zhuo Xiangding, Long Xiaotian, and the rest of the Ryuka leaders arrived at Zhuowen's residence. When they saw Zhuowen, they were overjoyed. "Zhuowen, did you successfully refine all the elixirs?" Zhuo Xiangding walked up and asked excitedly. "Fortunately, I didn't let you down." Zhuowen smiled and took out 5 spirit rings. He handed them to Zhuo Xiangding and said, "These spirit rings contain the 5 Zoisha 100 flower elixirs. There are tens of thousands of them. They can be used for a long time." Tens of thousands? Zhuo Xiangding's eyes widened in shock, revealing a dumbfounded look as his hands trembled slightly. These were immortal pills, and he actually had tens of thousands of them. With these immortal pills, their long clan would be able to nurture even more Emperor Realm cultivators. "Jun, I really don't know what to say. Grandpa really wants to thank you on behalf of the Ryuka," Zhuo Xiangding said emotionally. "Grandpa, this is what I should do. After all, I am also a member of the Ryuka. If it wasn't for the fact that I have to go to the upper world, I would have been able to refine other divine elixirs for the Ryuka." Guan waved his hand. "Are you leaving now?" Zhuo Xiangding suddenly asked. Zhuan pondered for a moment and nodded, almost. Zhuo Xiangding was silent for a while, then patted Zhuowen's shoulder and said with a smile, "You must be careful this time. You are the pillar of the Ryuka. Without you, the Ryuka would not have reached this level. Xiaoyun, you must take care of Zhuowen." "Father, don't worry. Yun is my son. If I don't take care of him, who else should I take care of?" Long Xiaotian said with a smile. After that, Zhuo Dingtian, Zhuo Baitian, and the other senior Ryuka officials also greeted Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian and reminded them to be careful. Let's go. Chapter 1424. Giant Ice Whale. The coordinates given by the Protector are at the northern extreme of the panicked Great World. It should be at the northern end. 2 rays of light streaked across the sky, revealing 2 figures. One of them was a younger man. His gaze landed on the north. Perhaps the passageway to the upper world is located in the north. Long Xiaotian replied. Let's continue on our journey. With our speed, it won't be long before we arrive at the northern extreme. Zhuo nodded. The two of them continued to rush towards the north. After half a day, the two of them arrived at the northern extreme. This place was a glacier. Numerous extremely large icebergs were constantly drifting within the glacier. The icebergs were extremely large. The small ones were nearly 1,000 feet long, while the large ones were tens of thousands of feet long. They were extremely large. Sush. The instant Zhuo and Long Xiaotian arrived, an extremely large and majestic iceberg stood at the deepest part of the glacier. A figure stood quietly there. It was the Protector. At this moment, the Protector had his hands behind his back as he stood at the top of the iceberg. His eyes focused slightly as he looked at Zhuo and Long Xiaotian. Let's go. Zhuo and Long Xiaotian stepped into the air. In a short while, they arrived at the deepest part of the glacier, where the Protector was. Longwen, I have already waited for you for half a year. You really took your time. The Protector did not give Zhuo any face. At the same time, his gaze landed on Long Xiaotian. He frowned and asked, Who is he? He is my companion. This time, I will be bringing him into the upper world. I heard from Long Xiaotian that after defeating the Protector, I seem to have the qualifications to bring a companion up, right? Zhuo said indifferently. The Protector's face froze. Soon after, he sneered and said, Bring him along if you want. In a while, if you die in the upper world passageway because of this person's burden, you can't blame me. Zhuo frowned slightly when he heard this. From the Protector's words, it seemed that this so-called upper world passageway was not so safe. Come with me. The Protector did not intend to converse with Zhuo. He said coldly and rushed forward. Zhuo and Long Xiaotian silently followed behind. After passing through the ice mountain, the three of them arrived at a vast ice field. At a glance, white cold air lingered everywhere. When the Protector reached the center of the ice field, he stopped. Soon after, he clenched his right hand and the law of lightning gathered in his palm. Then he smashed it towards the layer of ice below. Crack! A clear shattering sound rang out. Under the destructive force of the thunderbolt explosion, the layer of ice beneath their feet shattered with a loud bang. In the next moment, Zhuo and Long Xiaotian felt the entire ice plains tremble. Crack! Crack! The cracking sounds became more and more intense. Then, the two of them were shocked to find that the cracks in the ice layer under the Guardian's feet were spreading out in all directions at an incredible speed. A terrifying aura soared from the bottom of the ice layer into the sky. An indescribable pressure pressed down on the entire ice plains. Zhuo and Long Xiaotian looked at each other. They both leaped up and floated in the air. Their eyes were filled with uncertainty. You don't have to panic. The Protector said indifferently. The layer of ice beneath his feet shattered completely. Then, a huge black shadow that covered the sky leaped up from the bottom of the ice layer and carried the Protector into the sky. Only then did Zhuo and Long Xiaotian see clearly that the huge black shadow that carried the Protector was actually a huge black whale that was thousands of feet long. The Protector was standing on the head of this huge beast. Both of you come up. The colossal ice whale is from the upper world. It can lead us to the correct location of the upper world passageway, the Protector said indifferently. Zhuo and Long Xiaotian looked at each other and nodded. They both leaped onto the colossal ice whale. Then, the Protector whistled and the whale suddenly sank into the sea below the ice plains. The moment they entered the sea below, a bone-piercing chill assaulted them. Zhuo and Long Xiaotian could not help but shiver. Moreover, this chill was very tricky. It actually faintly showed signs of imprisoning their limbs. You've noticed, right? Below the ice plains is the colossal ice sea. It has the power to imprison. Even for me, who has grasped the law of lightning, if I enter the colossal ice sea, it won't take long for my limbs to become numb and I'll be imprisoned forever. However, the colossal ice whale can come and go freely in the colossal ice sea, so we can only rely on it to approach the upper world passageway. Perhaps because he noticed the surprise on Zhuo and Long Xiaotian's faces, the Protector explained indifferently. The colossal ice whale was extremely fast. It was like an arrow that had been released from a bow, causing terrifying currents in the colossal ice sea. Around an hour later, the colossal ice whale arrived at the bottom of the colossal ice sea. At the bottom of the sea, there was a rather large area of ruins. From the broken walls covered in seaweed, it could be seen that there was a sizable city in front of the ruins. Moreover, the strange thing was that the colossal ice sea around the ruins was unable to enter at all, making the ruins seem like land. The entrance is in the ruins. However, there is an extremely powerful danger in the ruins. Furthermore, the danger will increase as the number of people increases. Do you still want to bring a burden with you to the upper realm? The protector sneered. Zhuan glanced at the protector indifferently and said, "Why wouldn't I want to?" With that, Zhuan and Long Xiaotian stepped into the ruins without any hesitation. The protector was startled and immediately said coldly, "What, two ignorant fellows who are courting death? Perhaps Long Wen alone might be able to pass the test of the entrance to the upper world. Hee, it's a dead end." With that, the protector crossed his arms and looked at Zhuan and Long Xiaotian's every move with a mocking expression. As soon as he entered the ruins, Wen felt a strange aura of death. There was clearly nothing here, but there was a feeling of death. According to the protector, there is some kind of test here. I wonder what it will be? Long Xiaotian said with a frown. No matter what it is, I think that with us father and son working together, it should be more than enough. Zhuan said with a faint smile. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. As soon as Zhuan's voice fell, strands of black death aura gushed out from the surrounding ruins. They surged upwards and turned into more than a dozen black shadows. These black shadows were all dressed in black robes and their faces were covered by black hats. Their true appearances could not be seen clearly. Moreover, they all held black scythes in their hands. Cold light scattered in all directions and they looked extremely frightening. There are actually 12 death forms. These two are really finished. This is equivalent to 12 half-saints who have mastered the laws. Outside the ruins, the protector's expression changed at first, then he sneered. He looked at Zhuan and Long Xiaotian as if he was looking at dead people. Although Zhuan's combat strength was indeed good, in the face of 12 death forms whose strength was equivalent to a half-saint, the protector did not think that Zhuan and Long Xiaotian had any chance of winning. The protector was very clear that even if he faced these 12 death forms, he would probably be killed in an instant. What are these things? Their auras are really strong. I'm afraid they are comparable to a half-saint. Zhuan's gaze was solemn as he said with some astonishment. I'm not sure, but Tun, how about leaving these things to me to deal with? Just now, the protector seemed to be very disdainful of me. I need to perform well. Long Xiaotian clenched his hands and said to Zhuan. Zhuan grinned and said, with father taking action, there will naturally be no problem. With that, Zhuan took a step back while Long Xiaotian slowly walked out to face the 12 death forms alone. That Zhuan is not taking action? Letting another follower take action, isn't this courting death? The moment Long Xiaotian stepped out, the protector revealed a disdainful smile. However, before he finished speaking, his smile completely stiffened. Boom! An extremely terrifying aura erupted from Long Xiaotian's body. Furthermore, this aura became more and more terrifying. In the end, all the gravel on the ground of the ruins surged upwards, looking abnormally terrifying. Bang! 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 The moment this aura surged out, a saint's aura spread out. Following that, the 12 death forms above the ruins fell to the ground before they could even make a move. They constantly struggled as if there was a huge mountain pressing down on them. Die! Long Xiaotian only spat out this one word. Instantly, the 12 death forms exploded into countless black mist and disappeared into the air. The protector's mouth was wide open as his chin drooped down. He looked at this scene in disbelief. The 12 death forms with the combat strength of a half-saint fell to the ground one after another with Long Xiaotian's shout and were destroyed just like that. Gulp. The protector swallowed his saliva and finally looked straight at Long Xiaotian. His lips trembled as if he had thought of something and muttered, "This guy can't be a saint, right?" At this moment, the protector's heart was definitely crumbling. Just now, he actually showed a look of disdain and contempt in front of Long Xiaotian. Did he have a death wish? Thinking of this, the protector's body trembled. He was afraid that Long Xiaotian would settle the score with him after this. After the 12 death forms were destroyed, the billowing aura of death gathered in the center of the ruins. Following that, the ruins began to tremble. Following that, Zhuan and Long Xiaotian clearly felt that the area of the ruins was constantly rising. Following that, the ruins rose from the ground and brought Zhuan and Long Xiaotian upwards. Its speed became faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, they had left the black ice sea and continued to rise into the sky. Standing in the ruins, Long Xiaotian said rather calmly, "These ruins are probably the medium to go to the upper realm." Zhuan nodded and slightly raised his head. His gaze passed through the layers of fog and white clouds as he whispered, "I wonder what kind of place the upper realm is? What kind of missions exist there?" After the ruins disappeared into the black ice sea, the protector, carried by the black ice whale, also floated to the surface. Chapter 1425. Upper Realm. There are 6 forbidden areas in the upper realm, each of which is a taboo of life. There are all kinds of magical things in them, and most importantly, each forbidden area contains a kind of Saint Rune law. If you can break into the core of a forbidden area, you will be able to encounter the Saint Rune law. Whether you can successfully comprehend the power of the law naturally depends on your own comprehension. In the upper realm, if you successfully comprehend 2 or more Saint Rune laws, you will pass and have the qualifications to refine the Azure Dragon Hall. A grand voice resounded in Zhuowen's mind, causing Zhuowen's eyes to narrow slightly. 6 forbidden areas, 6 kinds of Saint Rune laws? Zhuowen was shocked. He didn't expect that there would be 6 kinds of Saint Rune laws in the upper realm. Most likely, these 6 kinds of Saint Rune laws were all comprehended by Taoist Zhang Long himself and engraved in the 6 forbidden areas of the upper realm. So powerful, to be able to comprehend 6 Saint Rune laws, this Taoist Zhang Long. Zhuan muttered to himself in amazement. After all, Taoist Zhang Long was a peak saint in ancient times. Even in the celestial sage realm, he was a peak powerhouse. He was a rare genius in that era, so to be able to comprehend 6 kinds of laws is indeed amazing. Xiao He stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and sighed with emotion. Although Long Xiaotian didn't say anything, his eyes were also full of shock. Long Xiaoan was also a profound sage who had grasped 2 kinds of laws. He knew very well how difficult it was to comprehend the Saint Rune law by himself. If he hadn't comprehended the Saint Rune Zhuowen had given him, he probably wouldn't have been able to grasp the law of wind. As for the law of darkness, it was originally a law that he had comprehended for many years. Later on, he had comprehended the law of darkness on the basis of the law of wind. It could be said that Long Xiaotian had grasped 2 kinds of laws by luck. As for comprehending a 3rd kind of law, in Long Xiaotian's opinion, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even if he became a celestial sage, it would be difficult for him to grasp a 3rd kind of law. After all, it was very difficult to grasp multiple laws at the same time. If one did not have the opportunity and sufficient comprehension ability, grasping multiple laws was simply a pipe dream. However, Taoist Master Zhang Long was a peerless monster. He actually comprehended 6 types of power of law by himself. It was truly terrifying. "Father, my mission this time is to enter the 2 forbidden zones and comprehend the power of laws within them. Father, would you like to enter the forbidden zones with me?" Zhuan asked Long Xiaotian. "Naturally, we'll go together." Long Xiaotian grinned. After all, there are ready-made Saint Rune laws in the forbidden zone as a reference. As long as one's comprehension isn't too bad, they can basically comprehend it. It's much easier than comprehending it alone. Zhuo nodded. Long Xiaotian was right. Comprehending the Saint Rune laws of the predecessors was much easier than comprehending the laws by himself. After all, he had the experience of the predecessors. All he needed to do was imitate the runes of the Saint Rune laws. Moreover, it could greatly reduce the time needed to comprehend the laws. We should be reaching the upper realm soon. Swoosh! The speed at which the ruins rose increased at first, then gradually weakened and finally came to a stop. A strong ray of light burst out, causing Zhuan and Long Xiaotian to involuntarily squint their eyes. When the two of them opened their eyes again, what appeared before them was not the land that they had expected, but an endless sea. In front of the sea stood a number of towering mountains that reached into the clouds. At a glance, there were a total of 19 mountains. Every single mountain was extremely vast, much larger than the 9 main peaks in the inner courtyard of the Divine Spectre realm. Even the entire mountain range that the inner courtyard was located on was much larger than that. The mountainsides of the mountains were shrouded in extremely dense white fog. There were mountains and rivers, birds chirping, and the fragrance of flowers. It looked like a paradise. However, among the 19 mountains, there was one that was extremely unique. This mountain was located in the center of the other 18 mountains. The size and area of this mountain was slightly larger than the other 18 mountains. What was even more bizarre was that this mountain was shrouded in layers of ink-black fog from the foot to the peak. The black fog was filled with a strange aura. This mountain is so strange. Zhuan and Long Xiaotian looked at each other. They could see the surprise in each other's eyes. Clearly, this unique mountain had left a deep impression on the two of them. Zhuan, I can't actually feel the laws of heaven and earth in the upper realm, Long Xiaotian said with a solemn expression. Zhuan's gaze was solemn. He did not say anything, but his expression had become extremely solemn. Perhaps we should first enter one of the mountains to understand the situation, Zhuan suggested. Long Xiaotian nodded. He naturally did not have any objections. Soon after, the two of them flew towards the nearest mountain. Very quickly. Swoosh. The moment the two of them stepped out of the ruins, there was a sudden sound of water splashing. Immediately after, a black shadow flew out of the water and pounced toward Zhuan and Long Xiaotian. You're courting death. Long Xiaotian's gaze turned cold. He waved his right hand and the law of wind swept out. Terrifying wind blades swept out. The black shadow was instantly cut into countless pieces by the wind blades. Blood splattered everywhere. Zhuan and Long Xiaotian saw the true appearance of the black shadow before them. Its appearance was similar to a shark, but its body was a few times larger than an ordinary shark. Its eyes were crimson red and there were fins on its back. Its body revealed a trace of ferocious aura. What is this? It doesn't look like a meta beast, Zhuan muttered softly. I'm not sure. It might be a beast that only exists in the upper realm. Let's continue forward. Long Xiaotian shook his head and said, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. However, not long after the two of them got up and set off, there was a continuous sound of water splashing. Then the strange fish beasts from before swarmed out of the water and rushed toward Zhuan and Long Xiaotian. There's a lot of them? Long Xiaotian's face turned pale. The number of strange fish below was too dense. There were almost tens of thousands of them. Father, come with me. Zhuan grabbed Long Xiaotian's arm and used the law of the void. He brought Long Xiaotian into the void and dodged the attacks of countless strange fish. Moreover, Zhuan, who had mastered the law of the void, was extremely fast. In a short while, they had shaken off the school of strange fish. This school of strange fish is not simple. With so many of them gathered together, I'm afraid that even an ordinary high-level emperor warrior would not be able to handle it, Long Xiaotian said solemnly. This part of the sea is very strange. It's as if the surrounding area is filled with these strange fish. Zhuan pointed at the sea below and saw that there were many black shadows surging wildly under the water. Long Xiaotian's face turned pale when he saw this. Instead of calling it the sea, it was more appropriate to call it the nest of the beasts. The number of beasts here was even denser than the sea. Let's get out of here quickly. Zhuan grabbed Long Xiaotian, and the power of the void revolved around them. The two of them entered the void again, and the black shadows that had been constantly surging on the surface of the sea gradually calmed down, perhaps because they had lost their target. About half a day later, Zhuan used the law of the void to avoid the various beasts in the sea and arrived at the closest mountain. Zhuan noticed that the eyes of the ferocious beasts in the sea were all red, as if they had lost their minds. They would bite anyone they saw. Even when Long Xiaotian released the pressure of a saint, The ferocious beasts in the sea remained unmoved and attacked without fear of death. When they arrived at the edge of the mountain and were about to step onto the shore, they were blocked by a vast force. What kind of force is this? Both of them took a few steps back and looked curiously at the force barrier that covered the surface of the mountain. This force was very strange. It looked very loose and its aura was not strong, but when the two of them got close, they were involuntarily pushed away, as if there was some kind of reaction force that pushed them away. What shocked them was not the strength of this force, but the fact that this force was unfamiliar to them. This force was neither the star energy of a martial emperor nor the saint energy of a saint. It was very strange. Who are the two of you? After Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian were pushed away, they immediately attracted the attention of several people at the foot of the mountain. Then, several burly men stepped onto the shore and stared at Yun and Long Xiaotian with vigilance. They are ordinary people? When Jun and Long Xiaotian's eyes fell on the several men at the foot of the mountain, they were both stunned. This was because these men did not have any martial arts aura, not even the slightest fluctuation of primary energy. They were ordinary people who had never practiced martial arts. However, these ordinary people were full of vitality, their faces were slightly red, and their bodies were strong. They were much stronger than ordinary people. What's going on? There are still ordinary people in the upper realm? Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian looked at each other and both of them were surprised. Obviously, they were very confused. Originally, they guessed that the quality of the martial artists in the upper realm was definitely above that of the panicked macro world. It was impossible for ordinary people who did not know martial arts to exist, but now they were really wrong. I'm asking, who are you? Why are you acting so sneakily? Are you a spy from the other mountains? Among the several men, the leader was extremely burly. His face was a little gloomy as he questioned Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian. Brother, we are not spies sent by other mountains, but passengers who fell into the water nearby. Coincidentally, this mountain is very close to us, so we want to temporarily take refuge here. At the same time, Yun took out an upper-grade spirit stone from the spiritual ring and held it in his hand. Of course, at this moment, Jun was also a little uncertain whether the spirit stones from the outside world could be used here. After all, this was the micro-world created by Tsang Long Taoist. Perhaps the currency was different from the outside world. Even so, Zhuowen still held the attitude of giving it a try. The principle of money moving people's hearts was applicable everywhere. Sure enough, when Zhuowen took out the spirit stone, the several men all showed a greedy look, as if the spirit stone was a rare treasure in their eyes. Do you still have this stone with you? The leader suddenly asked. Yes, of course. Chapter 1426. Fearsome Beast Sea. I wonder if you guys can make an exception? Zhuowen said with a smile. The muscular men on the shore immediately began to discuss among themselves, as if they were hesitating about something. Boss, I can't sense any aura from them. I'm afraid they are very weak. It shouldn't be a problem to let them in. One of the men said softly. The leader frowned and said, You guys should know how dangerous the fearsome beast sea is. It's quite unbelievable that these two are able to reach the shore safely. I'm afraid they aren't simple. The other man, on the other hand, said casually, Boss, what are you afraid of? We have the mountain god. How can two mere people threaten our 18th mountain? The leader's eyes flickered as he said, You're right. With the mountain god's presence, the demons will not be able to invade our 18th mountain. Let them in. With that said, the burly man came before Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian. He stretched out his hands and said, Hold my hands. I'll pull you in. Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian exchanged glances with one another. They were not suspicious and placed their hands in the man's hands. Following which, they felt a tremendous force coming from their hands. Following which, a strange force spread from the man's body to their bodies. The man pulled forcefully, and Jun and Long Xiaotian were pulled into the mountain as if they had teleported. What kind of force is this? Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian looked at each other and revealed a stunned expression. The burly man leading the group did not seem to have any yuan power ripples on his body. However, The mysterious energy that spread out from his body was not to be underestimated. It was this strange force that had pulled open the barrier on the surface of the mountain, allowing Zhuan and Long Xiaotian to enter. Perhaps it was because he sensed the astonishment in Zhuan and Long Xiaotian's eyes. The burly man revealed a proud expression, his heart fluttering. Clearly, he had mistaken the expressions of Zhuan and Long Xiaotian for the astonishment of his strength. Boss Les is the only one with a king body in our village. Among the hundreds of villages at the foot of the mountain, he's one of the best. The few lackeys behind the burly man were very clever, and they flattered the burly man. Although the burly man said no, his body and expression were very honest, and he appeared to be very proud. Yun and Long Xiaotian stared at each other. Obviously, they didn't know what the so-called monarch body was. Father, I'm afraid that the cultivation system of the upper bound is very different from that of the Pang Big World and the outside world. Although these people don't have any fluctuation of primary power, their physique and qi and blood are much more vigorous and powerful than ordinary martial artists. Zhuan secretly transmitted his voice to Long Xiaoan, and the latter nodded slightly. From the beginning, he had already noticed that these people didn't have any fluctuation of primary power. At first, he thought that these people were just ordinary people. Later, when he came into contact with the burly man, this idea was immediately rejected. In addition to the monarch body that these people had mentioned before, the two of them immediately thought that the cultivation method of the upper bound was very different from that of the outside world. Of course, there was also the mountain god that these people had mentioned before. What kind of existence was that? We have a total of 5 people here. It shouldn't be too much for you to give us 5 stones just now, right? The burly man in the lead was quite forthright. He rubbed his hands and smiled at Zhuan. It's not too much. Zhuan smiled slightly, took out 5 spirit stones, and handed them to the burly man named Les. The latter accepted them happily, and then divided the spirit stones with the others. My name is Les, and these 4 are my underlings. They are called Dago, Ergo, Sango, and Seago. These stones of yours are quite good. They can actually strengthen one's physique. For us body cultivators, it's a great supplement. After distributing the spirit stones, Les pointed at the 4 people behind him and introduced them with a smile. Dago, Ergo, Sango, and Seago? After hearing Les's introduction, Nguyen and Long Xiaotian were speechless. This naming was too casual. However, when they saw that Les's 4 underlings didn't seem to care, the 2 of them face-bombed, and their eyes were full of helplessness. I have another spirit stone here. Help me explain the situation of this mountain, and this spirit stone is yours. Zhuan took out another spirit stone and tossed it to Les with a smile. After catching the spirit stone, Les hurriedly stuffed it into his clothes and said, "No problem. Follow me." With that, Les led Zhuan and Long Xiaotian into the depths of the mountain. The area at the foot of this huge mountain was extremely large, equivalent to a small continent. At the end of the mountain was a continuous mountain path that extended to the top of the mountain. At a glance, there were villages at the foot of the mountain. These villages weren't very far from each other, and they were like tribes, scattered messily at the foot of the mountain. The villages were filled with laughter. There were men, women, children, and the elderly. The houses were all made of straw, and they looked rather simple and crude. Moreover, Yuan discovered that these villages at the foot of the mountain had one thing in common. At the entrance of each village, there was a bronze statue that was dozens of feet tall. This bronze statue was in the image of a slender middle-aged man. His hair was tied up into a crown, and his sleeves fluttered in the wind. He was dressed like a scholar. However, the facial features of the statue were unclear. Or rather, the facial features were covered by some kind of energy, making it impossible for people to see the true appearance of the facial features. That's our mountain god. It's because of the mountain god that we can live such a peaceful life, and we won't be invaded by the vicious sea monsters. Everyone lives in peace and is happy as they wish. Les pointed at the bronze statue in front of the village and introduced it to Zhuan and Long Xiaotian with a look of admiration. Mountain god! Zhuan stared at the statue and frowned. He asked, "There are so many villages at the foot of the mountain. Does every village have a statue like this? Les nodded. That's right. As long as the statue of the mountain god is erected, our village will be able to live and work in peace and prosperity. This is the blessing of the mountain god. It is something that must be built. Otherwise, disaster will befall the village. It's that bad? Zhuan and Long Xiaotian exchanged glances and communicated telepathically. Les brought Zhuan and Long Xiaotian back to his village. Along the way, the villagers greeted Les with great enthusiasm. Although Zhuan and Long Xiaotian were unfamiliar faces, causing many people to reveal doubtful expressions, most of them revealed amiable expressions and did not show any hostility. Zhuan and Long Xiaotian found it rather difficult to deal with such simple villagers. It had been a very long time since they had experienced such simplicity in the world of martial arts. The only feeling they had was mutual deception and scheming against each other. If you didn't act ruthlessly, you might very well end up dead. However, Zhuan and Long Xiaotian found it rather difficult to adapt to such a simple atmosphere here. Zhuan chatted quite a bit with Les along the way and managed to glean a lot of information from him. It turned out that this region of the sea was called the Fearsome Demon Sea. There were countless evil and ferocious beasts in it. If one accidentally fell in, one would have to face the endless attacks of the evil beasts. If one didn't have the ability to escape, they would definitely die if they fell into the Fearsome Demon Sea. In the Fearsome Demon Sea, there were 19 mountains. Among them, the first 18 mountains were full of vitality and contained countless living creatures. Moreover, each mountain had a mountain god sitting on it. The 18 mountains had simple names. They were the first mountain, all the way to the 18th mountain. The mountain gods were named according to the name of the mountain. For example, the mountain god of the first mountain was called the first mountain god, while the one of the 18th mountain was called the 18th mountain god. Zhuan and Long Xiaotian were on the 18th mountain. The 18th mountain god was the pillar of all the living beings on the mountain and was also the faith of all living beings. However, when Zhuan asked about the 19th mountain, Les's expression changed drastically. He didn't say anything to explain, as if there was some taboo. Zhuan, the 19th mountain seems to be some kind of taboo. Could it be the forbidden area you mentioned? Long Xiaotian transmitted his voice to Zhuan. It's very likely. Among the 19 mountains, only the 19th mountain doesn't have any living beings. Apart from the forbidden area mentioned by Tsang Long Taoist, there's nothing else. Zhuan smiled faintly. It's just that we don't know how to get to the 19th mountain at the moment. It's said that the sea near the 19th mountain is much more terrifying than here. Furthermore, we don't know much about the 19th mountain. Long Xiaotian said hesitantly. That's why we have to find the 18th mountain god. Since the mission said that there are sacred runes and other rare treasures in the forbidden area, I don't think the 18th mountain god will let go of these things. If we want to obtain these things, we have to send someone into the 19th mountain, Zhuan said confidently. That's the only way. Long Xiaotian nodded. Les brought Zhuan and Long Xiaotian around the surrounding villages. Then he stopped and said, I've shown you the villages at the foot of the mountain. I think it's about time. Zhuan smiled and took out 2 spirit stones from his spirit ring. He said, Brother Les, I also want to ask, how can we meet the mountain god? I heard you say that the mountain god lives at the top of the mountain. Does that mean that we can meet the mountain god if we climb to the top of the mountain? Les's expression changed slightly, but he shook his head and said, the mountain god is everywhere, but it's also illusory. If you want to find the mountain god, I advise you to give up because no one on the 18th mountain has ever seen the mountain god. No one on the top of the mountain has ever seen the mountain god? Zhuan asked with a frown. I don't know about that. The people on the top of the mountain are all important people. You need to have at least an emperor body to be qualified to climb there. I'm just a king body, so I can't answer your question. Les shook his head. Above an emperor body? Zhuan and Long Xiaotian looked at each other and pondered. Chapter 1427. Surely body in the eyes of many cultivators in the upper world, the physical body was the source of all power. Only the physical body could last forever. Therefore, the cultivators in the upper world never cultivated vitality. Instead, they cultivated the physical body. Here, the physical body's level was similar to the origin power's level. They were the king body, the emperor body, and the holy body. As the name implied, the king body corresponded to the 3 realms of King Zhao, while the holy body corresponded to the pilgrimage realm. Les had a king body. He was one of the best in the hundreds of villages at the foot of the mountain, but he still didn't have the right to go up the mountain. It wasn't that he didn't want to go up, but the 18th mountain had an extremely powerful pressure. The cultivators of the 18th mountain called this pressure God's might, also known as the mountain God's might. It was said that the mountain God's might was a test set by the mountain God for the entire mountain. It had an extremely powerful effect on tempering the physical body. The 18th mountain is 10,000 feet tall. It is divided into 4 levels. The first level is the foot of the mountain. The God's might is the weakest there. Cultivators with king bodies and below can withstand it. The second level is 30,000 feet above the foot of the mountain. Cultivators with king bodies and above gather there. There aren't villages there, but small towns. They are of a higher level than the villages at the foot of the mountain. Of course, they are much smaller. The third level is 70,000 feet above the foot of the mountain. Cultivators with emperor bodies gather there. The emperor's might is vast. They can break the space with a wave of their hand. They can crush the air with a pinch of their hand. The fourth level is 10,000 feet above the foot of the 18th mountain. It is also the peak of the 18th mountain. The only 2 holy bodies of the 18th mountain are there. Speaking of this, Les's eyes were filled with respect. He continued, the holy bodies are the representatives of the mountain God. If you want to see the mountain God, you must go to the top of the mountain and see the 2 holy bodies. Of course, that's impossible. Only powerful cultivators like the holy bodies can walk 10,000 feet and climb to the top of the mountain. Ordinary people can't go up at all. The holy bodies are extremely mysterious. I've never seen them. I've only heard of them. Speaking of this, Les shook his head and laughed. He thought that it was impossible to go to the top of the mountain to see the 2 holy bodies. Is it okay to go to the top of the mountain? Father, let's go up together. Zhuowen nodded and spoke seriously. The smile on Les' face froze. He quickly shook his head and said, "What are you talking about? You want to go to the top of the mountain? It's not that I'm looking down on you, but the top of the mountain is really impossible to climb. I'm afraid that even the second level will be extremely difficult." Zhuowen smiled politely and exchanged glances with Long Xiaotian. The 2 of them walked towards the end of the village and walked up the limestone steps that led to the top of the mountain. Ruza's body stiffened as he looked at the 2 figures walking towards the top of the mountain. His gaze was extremely complicated. After he came back to his senses, he sighed softly and muttered to himself, "These 2 guys are really not afraid of death. They look so soft and tender. How could they possibly withstand divine might? I have to follow these 2 people. If something happens to them, I can help them." With that, Les followed closely behind Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian. Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian did not have any aura of physical cultivation. In his eyes, they were 2 rookies. He did not think that they could go far. However, what happened next stunned Les. This was because Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian walked up the stairs step by step. They were not afraid of the divine might that was getting stronger and stronger. They talked and laughed along the way. On the other hand, Les himself began to pant. He was a little weak. What the fuck is this? Why are these 2 rookies not afraid of divine might at all? Les gritted his teeth and forced himself to follow closely behind Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian. With Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian's current strength, they were not afraid of the divine might between the first and second levels. Only the divine might above the third level could threaten them. At 3,000 feet, Les gritted his teeth and crawled behind Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian. The terrifying pressure pressed down on his body. It made him feel as if 10,000 ants were gnawing at his heart. We're about to reach the second level. Les, do you want to go to the second level? Zhuowen suddenly asked indifferently. At this moment, Les was almost delirious. He squinted his eyes and could only see Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian's footsteps. He could not even hear Zhuowen's question clearly. He could only hear the second level. I want to enter the second level. I want to become a king body. Les clutched the soil under his feet. Entering the second level and becoming a king body had been his dream for many years. However, it was not so easy to break through as a body cultivator. No matter how hard he worked, it was difficult to enter the second level under the divine might. But today, he had followed behind Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian. For some reason, he had arrived at the 30,000-foot mark. He only needed to take one more step to reach the second level. That was the place where the emperor physiques gathered. Then he would be able to become one of them. You will enter the second level and become a king body. Zhuowen chuckled and grabbed Les' body with his right hand. Then he stepped through the threshold of the 3,000 feet mark. Rumble, 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 rumble. Zhuowen was shocked to discover that the divine might of the second level poured into Les's body like rivers flowing into the sea. As the divine might poured into his body, the aura in Les's body became more and more terrifying. It was as if a wild beast was born in his body. Les, on the other hand, was overwhelmed by the comfortable feeling from the divine might and the exhaustion from the climb. He let out a long cry and fainted completely. The second level is indeed where the cities gather. The phenomenon caused by Les breaking through from a king body to a king body has probably attracted the attention of the other king bodies on the second level. I think we should leave, Long Xiaotian said to Zhuowen. Okay, let's go. Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, the two of them took a step forward and disappeared from the spot. Zhuowen had helped him as much as he could. Whether or not Les could become a king body depended on his own luck. Swoosh, swoosh. After Zhuowen and Long Xiaotian left, figures with terrifying auras rushed out of the city on the second level. They all rushed to the unconscious Les. Someone from the first level has entered the second level. This person has received the divine might. It won't be long before he becomes a king body. This person will become a member of our king body. Take him back to the city. As for who he will belong to, we will discuss it after he wakes up. The king body cultivators who rushed over discussed for a while, then took the unconscious Les away and left. 70,000 feet. The divine might around us is quite interesting. At 70,000 feet, Zhuowen stood quietly with a faint smile on his face. The divine might at 70,000 feet had already made Zhuowen feel something. Let's go. We should be careful when we enter the third level. That is where the king bodies gather. Just don't cause any trouble, Long Xiaotian said with a smile. Father, with our combination, I'm afraid only the two saint bodies at the top of the 18th mountain and the legendary mountain god can pose a threat to us. The king bodies on the third level shouldn't be a threat to us, Zhuowen said, shaking his head. It's fine to be careful, Long Xiaotian said cautiously. Zhuowen nodded, and the two of them stepped into the third level. What a powerful pressure. This king body's pressure can actually cause some hindrance to me. As soon as they entered the third level, Nguyen bent his knees slightly and squinted his eyes, revealing a cautious look. He circulated all the immortal power in his body to resist the divine might. Someone has entered the third level. Could it be that someone has advanced to the king body? At the top of the 18th mountain, the pressure here was extremely strong. The surrounding air even faintly formed the shapes of dragons, phoenixes, and various other strange beasts. All kinds of strange beasts were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. At the top of the mountain, there was a huge oval platform. On the platform stood a huge palace. In the square in front of the palace, two stalwart figures stood side by side. One of them was old and the other was young. The old one looked to be in his 60s, but he looked to be in his 40s. His bones were strangely large and his arms were long. He looked like an ape with an abnormal body proportion. The young one was about 27 or 28 years old. He was about 10 feet tall, and his muscles were bulging like a small giant. The surface of their bodies emitted a brilliant golden light, as if they were gilded with gold. A majestic aura burst out from their bodies. The enormous divine might around the mountain peak transformed into countless strange beasts. When they swept over the two of them, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. They were completely unable to cause any harm to the two of them. The divine might at the top of the mountain was terrifying. An ordinary king body would have been crushed into a bloody pulp in an instant. However, the two of them seem to be fine. And I feel that there are two people who have entered the third level this time. This is a bit strange. The one who is closest to the king body in the second level is Wei Tong. Other than this kid, there doesn't seem to be a second person, right? The old man frowned slightly. I can't think of a second person. We can use the divine might's aura to restore the appearance of the two people who have entered the third level. Then we will know. The young man said indifferently. The old man nodded and agreed. Then let's give it a try. As he spoke, the old man clenched his right hand. Suddenly, there was a crunching sound. His arm exploded with a blazing golden light, like a small sun. Suddenly, the divine might around the old man began to go crazy. Then, like rivers flowing into the sea, it gathered in front of the two of them, forming two blurry figures. As time passed, the two figures gradually became clearer. They transformed into the appearance of Zhuan and Long Xiaodong. Who are these two people? Looking at the two of them, the old man and the young man were stunned. They couldn't help but ask at the same time. I have never seen these two people before. I'm afraid they are not cultivators of the 18th mountain. I have to go to the third level to take a look. The young man snorted coldly. There was a hint of killing intent in his eyes. He took a step forward and jumped down from the mountain peak toward the third level. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.